All right. Apparently, I'm gonna try narrating, reading an audiobook. I've never done this before at all. I'm an electrician, so this has nothing to do with reading. I do read a lot, and apparently she thinks that qualifies me, so, but that is in my head and not allowed, so it's kind of a different animal. But I guess she wants me to try this anyway and says she'll make it worth my while. Just kidding. No, you can edit that out. I don't care. All right, I guess let's start. Okay. Dropping Down the Rabbit Hole is a choose your own adventure interactive book series where different authors can all connect to different authors in the series books. And then, so they can connect to a different book at any point in the series, any genre, anything, and then they take it in a completely different direction. So there's over 3 dozen authors currently and submitting more manuscripts on her website, stephaniejamespublishing.com, where you can find more information. A few cool things on there that I've played with. So it's kind of cool. But anyway, so this is one of the books. This is actually a book by Mike Minicky called Next Move. And this connects to the book Your Move, which I've read. I've actually read them both and actually pretty impressive, but it's connected to Daniel Maya's book, Your Move, and then kind of takes in a different thing. So there is an audiobook on her YouTube channel that you can actually listen to. So if you haven't listened to that yet or read the book, stop this, go listen to that, and then you can come back and listen to this or read the book. And there's 2 other manuscripts that I actually read too that were actually pretty cool by 2 girls. Shay, yeah, Shay Smith and Kristen Moran. And then, okay, yeah, Wrong Move and Last Move. So I'm not sure which ones, but I did read the manuscripts and they're actually really good connecting to Mike Minicky's book. So definitely check those out. I think she's saying they're coming out soon. Oh, they're out right now, I guess. So, okay. Anyway, ignoring all that, yeah, so check out the different books, submit manuscripts, do whatever you're going to do. I don't know. Okay. So, yeah, I guess we'll start and see how good we do. I'm not really going to edit this or reread it or do anything that people do. So, if I laugh in the middle or do whatever, I'm not going back. So, good luck. And if this sucks, this is on her. Peace.
Chapter 1 Home. The minivan pulled into the driveway, coming to a stop. David jumped out of the driver's seat after turning the engine off and headed to the back of the van to start unloading the luggage. Come on, Bobby, give your old man some help with these. David put the lighter boxes on the ground for his son to carry. Bobby reluctantly undid his seatbelt, grumbling as he climbed out of the van to help his father. The last thing he wanted to do was work after being stuck in the van for hours on end. Cynthia sat very still in the passenger seat. As she looked at the house she had been born and raised in, the only part of her body that moved was her trembling lower lip. Her eyes took in every inch of the structure, triggering the memories that she had of the place, including the ones she had spent many years suppressing. Cynthia could feel her pulse beat faster throughout her body as bits and pieces of those memories flashed rapidly through her mind. At first it was a blend of images, playing chess with her grandpa, mother's obsession with parrot decorations, and father tucking her into bed every night. Cynthia could hear a whisper in the background of her thoughts. She couldn't make it out at first, but it grew louder as the memories flashed quicker. She strained to hear the words, even though she knew what they would be. The same 2 words that had haunted her dreams ever since she was 7 years old. Your move. Cynthia's body jumped violently as the back door of the minivan was slammed shut, clutching her chest in an attempt to stop her heart from beating hard against her ribs. She looked into the side mirror. David and Bobby were coming up her way with arms full of boxes. Taking slow, steadying breaths to calm her nerves, Cynthia managed to open the door to help them unload more of their stuff. David gave her a kiss on her head. Cynthia forced a convincing smile for him as he proceeded to the front door, with a still grumbling Bobby in tow. She watched him for a moment, wishing that David and Bobby had stayed home. But, deep down, having them come along was the only way she could cope. Cynthia stopped in her tracks as she approached the front porch, almost dropping the load she was carrying. There, only a few feet in front of her, was a 2-headed snake hiding in the fallen leaves, both heads raised up as if to greet her, welcoming her back, most likely to finish the job they were sent to do all those years ago. "Cynthia, honey, are you all right?" David asked, seeing her freeze up. When she didn't respond, he quickly set the boxes down and hurried over to her. David called her name a couple more times, But she continued to stare hard at the ground. Starting to panic, David grabbed her by the shoulders and gave her a gentle shake. Finally, Cynthia looked up at him as if the light was turned on. "I'm sorry, what?" Cynthia asked. "I've been calling your name, but you just kept looking at that ground over there as if you had seen a ghost." David pointed to the pile of fallen leaves only a few feet in front of her. Cynthia looked at where he indicated. There was nothing there except a half-exposed garden hose in the leaves. The two-headed snake was nowhere to be seen. "It was just my imagination playing tricks on me by coming back home." "Sorry, David. It's just, I don't know about this." Tears filled her eyes. "Hey, it's okay. This is a lot to take in. With your father dying in the car accident, coming back to your childhood home, having to take care of your mom until we can sell the house, it's more than anyone could expect you to handle." David carefully wiped the tears off her cheeks before slowly leaning in to kiss her softly. "Just remember, you don't have to do this alone. Anything you need, just ask. I'm here for you." Cynthia looked up into her husband's dark brown eyes, seeing the love he had for her. It was the same love she saw 15 years ago when they first got married. She pulled him close to her, hugging him tightly. "Come on, you two. There's a child present," Bobby yelled. He was holding a box filled with several of his toys and staring at both of them with a disgusted expression on his face. They laughed as he joined them on the porch. David ruffled his son's hair as Cynthia knocked on the front door. After a few moments of nothing, David tried peeking into the long window next to the door. Cupping his hands around his eyes to remove the glare from the glass, he looked for any sign of life. "It doesn't look like anyone's home. I thought you said you called your mom at the rest stop." David continued to look for Cynthia's mother, Claire. "I did. She said she was going to take a nap first, but would be ready for us when we arrived. She's probably still sleeping. The doctor had prescribed her pretty strong painkillers and sleeping pills," Cynthia replied, as she dug around in her purse for the key to the house. She still couldn't believe she still had the key. Cynthia had vowed to herself that once she had moved out at 18, she would never return to this place. That vow was kept, until now. Cynthia's hand trembled as she slid the key into the hole. Taking a deep breath, she turned the key, feeling the lock give. Opening the door, she stepped inside, not knowing what to expect. The living room looked almost the exact same as it had the day she had left for college. The only difference Cynthia could see was some new family holiday pictures of them all together, now decorated the walls and shelves. A tinge of guilt passed through her as she remembered how she would make excuses not to visit her parents, forcing them to come visit her instead. But how could she tell them the truth when they didn't remember everything that had happened when she was 7? "This place smells like old people," Bobby complained as he pinched his nose shut. "Bobby! Manners," David replied, giving his son a look of disapproval. He then called out to see if anyone was home. "Hello, it's David, Cynthia, and Bobby," Bobby added. "In the bedroom," came a muffled voice. Cynthia recognized her mother's distressed voice. Panic welled up inside as she rushed to her parents' bedroom. David followed close behind while indicating for Bobby to stay where he was. As they entered the bedroom, they found Cynthia's mother lying on the floor next to the bed. One of her legs was caught in the handrails that had been recently attached. "Oh my God, Mom!" Cynthia cried as she went to her mother's side. "Are you okay? What happened?" "I'm fine. Only my pride is hurt, I think," her mother replied as she reached out, taking Cynthia's hand in hers. "I fell off that bed trying to get to the restroom. My leg got caught in the new handrails, causing me to lose my balance. I told the doctor those things would be the death of me." "The doctor was only looking out for your safety. You have several broken ribs and a spinal injury from the car accident. The handrails are necessary to help you," Cynthia chastised. "Help me, it almost killed me. Luckily, I had your father put this thick carpeting in all those years ago. I didn't think it would be for this reason, but nevertheless." "I can remove the handrails if you want," David offered as he carefully removed her leg from the railing. "Yes." "No." David looked at both women and realized he had broken one of the very important rules. Never get in between a mother and her daughter. He decided his best action now was to keep quiet. Without saying a word, he bent over carefully, helping Cynthia's mother up. Claire gave him a thank you and pat on his shoulder before Cynthia took her to use the restroom. "Dad," Bobby yelled, finally seeing him alone. "Can I take my soccer ball outside?" His father agreed, but told him to be back inside before dark. David watched Bobby grab the ball near the door and head out. He then waited outside the bathroom just in case he was needed. But after a few moments, Cynthia and her mother came out laughing. He was happy to hear his wife laugh again after all she had been through recently. Cynthia looked over at him and smiled. "Mom says she never got to take her nap, so I'm going to help her into bed. Can you start dinner?" "On it," he replied. Cynthia quietly closed the door after she exited her mother's room. Her mother had fallen asleep as soon as her head had hit the pillow. She wished she could do something more to help her rather than just being a babysitter. Cynthia felt so helpless. "Why did you have to leave us, Dad?" "I don't know what I am doing. I love you so much." Tears again welled up in her eyes as she could hear her father say. I love you too, Sid. Wiping away the tears, Cynthia pushed herself away from the door and went to go check to see if David needed any help. Her breath caught in her throat as she looked up, seeing the string in the ceiling that would lower the aluminum ladder that led to the attic, the place where it all had happened when she was a child. Even now it sent shivers down her spine. With a burst of adrenaline ignited by old fear, she ran past it as if expecting the ladder to shoot down, stopping her from escaping. Then she would be sucked up into the attic once again to play the game of death. Cynthia entered the kitchen in a hurry, almost running into David, who was chopping up vegetables for what he considered to be his world-famous stew. Noticing her pale face and ragged breathing, he asked if everything was all right. Cynthia assured him everything was fine, that she would get the rest of the boxes out of the van. Once outside, she gulped down large amounts of air as if her lungs couldn't get enough. Cynthia set the last box on the living room couch before collapsing on a nearby chair. She was exhausted and just wanted to take a long, hot shower. The aroma of David's stew, however, ignited her hunger. A loud growling noise came from Cynthia's stomach. "Whoa, was that your stomach?" asked David, as he sat down beside her, pulling her into his giant arms. "Unfortunately, I really wanted to take a shower, but I think my stomach has other plans," she replied, welcoming his embrace, feeling safe in it. "Plenty of time to take a shower after. Who knows, I might join you," David said before pulling away sharply in a teasing manner. "But right now, dinner is done. Let's eat." David laughed at the pouting look Cynthia gave him. He smiled at her while standing up, then went to set the table. Cynthia sighed. Before going to check on her mother, after taking her mother to the restroom to wash up, they got seated at the dinner table, anxiously waiting to taste the world-famous stew. Bobby entered the house, almost at a run as he headed for the dinner table. David couldn't help but smile at this. He was sure his son had a special sensor built into him that always told Bobby when food was ready. Cynthia, on the other hand, wasn't so amused when she saw how dirty Bobby's hands were, and made him remedy the situation before filling the plate. The dinner went well, for the most part. Claire told many stories about Cynthia growing up. Many of the stories David had heard before, others he had not. Those he hadn't heard before made him laugh, since most of them were embarrassing moments. She would lightly punch him in the arm every time he laughed, but Cynthia couldn't help but laugh herself. Whenever the conversation included stories about her father, though, Cynthia would get quiet and look down into her stew as if she was trying to find the answers. "Come, dear, your father wants us to be happy for the time we had together, not sad at the loss of him being gone," her mother assured her as she reached out, taking Cynthia's hand into hers. Tears started to rim Cynthia's eyes as she remembered her mother telling her the same thing when her grandfather had died. "Claire, I don't think you told me any stories about Cynthia's participating in sports," David said, hoping to change the subject. "Oh, that's because she really wasn't interested in any sports when she was a little girl," Claire replied. She let go of Cynthia's hand, turning her attention to David. "The only thing she ever enjoyed doing was playing chess with my father. He had been a great chess player in his youth. He had even traveled to tournaments, winning almost every one of them." "Wow, how exciting. I loved playing chess as a kid myself, although I was not very good at it. There was always the confusion about how the knights were able to move, 3 over there, 2 up there, or something like that. I can't remember," David confessed. "It is up 2, over 1, or you can move over 1, up 2. Cynthia clamped a hand over her mouth. She hadn't meant to say anything out loud. "That's right, dear," her mother smiled, patting her hand. "After all these years, you still remember. It was one of your grandfather's greatest passions, teaching you how to play. Oh, how he would wait for you outside your school, just so he could educate you about the game on your walk home. Your grandfather was so proud at how quickly you learned. I remember him talking to all of his friends at the park about how great little Sid was becoming." "I didn't know I married a legacy," David teased. "How come you never offered to play chess with me?" "I don't know. I just lost interest after my grandpa passed," Cynthia replied, quietly looking at her full bowl of stew. "Well, if you ever want to play again, your grandfather's chessboard is still up in the attic with all of his belongings," her mother offered. Cynthia's head shot up to look at her mother wide-eyed. "You still have it? It's here?" "Of course. I would never get rid of that chessboard. He was obsessed with it. Being a chess champion and all that," her mother said with pride. "However, for some reason he could never beat this man that would meet him at the park every Saturday. That was until about a week before he passed away. He finally beat that gentleman, and the chessboard was his prize. Your grandfather vowed he would keep that board as a reminder of his victory." "Cynthia, something wrong?" David asked, concerned, as seeing Cynthia begin to tremble. "I'm fine. Just feeling a little under the weather after such a long day," she replied. "If you don't mind, I will take that hot shower now." "Are you sure?" David asked. "You haven't even touched your food." "I'll take it," Bobby exclaimed, as he pushed his now empty bowl off to the side while grabbing his mother's bowl. David was about to scold him, but Cynthia waved to let him have it, and then excused herself. After a much-needed, long, hot shower, Cynthia opened the door to her old bedroom and immediately felt like she had stepped back in time. The room was kept the exact way she had left it. Well, almost. The parrot decor that her mother had insisted on was now met with several new owl decals, really sticking to the whole bird theme. Mother. Cynthia sat on the bed, looking at the window, expecting to see the upside-down heart with an upside-down smiley face in it. The one she had drawn a long time ago, with the moisture on the glass. It had been a couple of days after her grandfather's funeral. Now, here she was again for another one. Tears streamed down her cheeks, causing droplets to fall into her lap as she traced the lines of her past memories. She didn't bother wiping them away. Please take care of my dad, Grandpa. He's with you now. Chapter 2. Neighbors. After Bobby finished his breakfast, his father had him go play outside so that he wouldn't disturb his mother and grandmother, who were still asleep. Bobby was more eager to go play versus being stuck inside, doing chores he knew his father would find for him. Grabbing his jacket, he ran out the door. Bobby was kicking his soccer ball against a large oak tree in the front yard when a boy came over, walking towards him. "Hey," the boy said as he got closer. "My name's Tyler. I live in the house over there." Tyler pointed out a 2-story home across the street about 3 houses down. "Did Mrs. Myers die or something? Are you the new owners? I didn't see you move in." At first, Bobby didn't know what to make of the boy, or how to respond to the barrage of questions. Not wanting to be rude, especially since this boy might be the only kid in the neighborhood his own age, he introduced himself. "My name is Bobby. Mrs. Myers is my grandma. She isn't dead, just sleeping right now." "Oh, I heard my mom tell my father that Mr. Meyer had died," Tyler replied, using the sleeve of his sweater to wipe the snot from his nose. "Yes, that would be my grandfather. He died in a car accident. My grandmother was hurt, but she's still alive." Bobby didn't know if the boy was very slow, but he felt the need to explain everything very slowly. "So are you going to live here now? Are we neighbors?" "Hi, neighbor." Tyler held out his hand. Bobby saw the trail of snot all along the boy's arm and decided to wave instead. Again, "Hi. No, we are not moving in. We are here for the funeral, and then my parents are going to sell the—" "Is that your soccer ball?" Tyler interrupted, grabbing the ball out of Bobby's hands. "Hey, let's play." Bobby sighed. He longed to be back home with his friends. At least he understood them. Still, playing with Tyler had to be more fun than kicking the ball against the tree, or so he hoped. The boys kicked the ball back and forth across the front yard, until Tyler kicked the ball into the street. After Bobby almost got hit by a car trying to retrieve it, they decided it was best to play in the backyard, where there was a high wooden fence. The boys played a couple of games, with Tyler winning almost every time. Bobby started getting upset that this kid, whom he had assumed wasn't all there, was beating him easily. Now, they were at the game point, once again Bobby in control of the ball, racing against 2 rocks they had set up as a goal against the fence. Bobby prepared to score. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Tyler coming straight at him. He knew that Tyler was faster than him, and the only way he could score now was to kick the ball hard. Putting all his considerable weight behind the kick, Bobby sent the ball flying right over the fence into the neighbor's yard. The sound of glass breaking caused the boys to look at each other with apprehension. "I gotta go," Tyler exclaimed, then turned and ran. Great. So much for that friendship. Bobby looked to see if his dad had seen what he had done. Since no one came running out of the house screaming at him, he figured he was in the clear. Bobby's relief was temporary once he realized that the owner of the house next door would find the broken glass, along with his ball as evidence. Bobby slowly went to the fence, where there was a small hole in it. He had to practically stand on his toes to see through the other side. About 10 feet in front of him was the broken window. Crap. I'm going to be grounded for the rest of my life, unless I get the ball before anyone finds it. Since there was no movement from next door, he assumed that meant no one was home. Bobby started looking for a way to climb the fence. He didn't want to go around the front where someone could see him. Finding nothing to stand on that would allow him to reach the top of the fence, he started to lose hope. Eureka! There was a hole in the fence where some of the rotten wood had broken off behind a large bush. Bobby quickly took off his jacket and started squeezing his way to the other side. About halfway through, he got stuck, as his belly filled the hole completely. Pushing on the fence with his hands, he tried to wiggle free. It was no use. There was a creaking sound as the door was opened and then shut. Bobby looked up to see the scariest old man he had ever seen. He was tall, very thin, with weathered and wrinkled skin. The white wisps of his hair stood out from the man's scalp as if he had just been electrocuted, enhancing his horrifying appearance. But it was the man's eyes that truly had Bobby's pulse racing throughout his body. They were sunken so far back in the man's skull that it appeared as if there were only 2 black holes where people should have been. Beads of sweat formed on Bobby's brow as his heartbeat thundered in his ears. Putting his hands on the ground, he pushed with all his might to free himself to get back into his own yard. He winced in pain as sharp edges of the broken fence bit into his flesh. Bobby glanced back at the old man to see him put his hand out to his side before Kane appeared out of thin air. Bobby blinked a couple of times to make sure his eyes were not playing tricks on him. The man slowly approached him while using the cane for support. In full panic mode, Bobby squirmed as hard as he could to get away from this demon who had been summoned to devour him. The edges of the fence cut deeper into his skin, but he didn't care. At that moment, Bobby promised God that he would never eat junk food again if the Lord saved him from this nightmare. Bobby sucked in his gut the best he could, giving him enough movement to move his knees against the fence for leverage. The old man was directly in front of him, now raising the cane in the air for a strike at Bobby's exposed head. The end of the cane barely missed its mark as Bobby pulled clear of the fence, falling back into his own yard. Without a care for the immense pain in his abdomen, he took flight towards the house as fast as his little legs could carry him. Cynthia slowly opened her eyes while letting out a yawn. The room was bathed in golden light coming from the sun as it climbed its way into the sky. Her body took in the warmth from all those rays, feeling refreshed for the first time in months. Her stomach ached, reminding her she hadn't really eaten since yesterday morning. Turning to wake up David, she was greeted with an empty bed. Bolting to a sitting position, Cynthia looked at the clock to find it almost noon. Since it was so late, David was probably already up, letting her sleep knowing she needed the rest. Come on, Sid. Just because you returned home doesn't mean people are going to start disappearing again. Not taking any chances, Cynthia hurriedly got dressed. She entered the kitchen after running past the attic door to find her mother on the couch watching television. David was at her father's desk, looking through a pile of papers. He looked up at her, smiling. Cynthia let out her breath in relief before scanning the room for Bobby. At that, they heard the back door hit the wall as it flung open, followed by the bathroom door being slammed shut. Both Cynthia and David went to go see what was going on. "Bobby, is that you?" Cynthia asked as she tried to open the bathroom door, but it was locked. She could hear the water running, but there was no answer from Bobby. David had her move out of the way. He took the pen apart that he had behind his ear and used it to push the button inside the hole of the doorknob. There was a clicking sound, and the door opened. Cynthia let out a scream, seeing Bobby standing there shirtless and blood around his midsection. He had been attempting to wash the blood away when they broke in. "David, call 911!" Cynthia grabbed Bobby, positioning him in a way she could assess the damage. "Let's take a look first," David said, as he took a closer look at Bobby's injuries. Seeing how they were mostly superficial, he grabbed the first aid kit out of the cabinet. "You want to tell us what happened?" Knowing it was no use to lie, Bobby told his parents everything that happened, from meeting Tyler to kicking the ball over the fence to the creepy old man that tried to kill him. "That would be Mr. Wilburn," Claire said, as she neared the bathroom, using her walker to see what all the commotion was. Cynthia remembered the Wilburns only by name as a child. They had always stayed to themselves. The only time she thought she ever saw Mr. Wilburn was when her grandfather had been teaching her a special chess maneuver. Even the details were fuzzy. The only other thing she remembered about the Wilburns was that her old classmate, Ellie, believed Mr. Wilburn had been a real witch. "He's still alive?" "He was old back then," Cynthia cringed. She remembered when she had thought her mother was old at 30. "I mean, he'd have to be close to 90 now." "More like 100. Bobby's body quivered as he remembered looking upon Mr. Wilburn. "Regardless of the man's age or who he is, he can't be going around trying to hit kids. I will have to talk to him and see about getting your soccer ball back." David pressed the bandage in place and ruffled Bobby's hair before excusing himself. It was after the third time knocking that David heard a sound come from somewhere in the house. It was muffled, but he thought it sounded like a cane tapping on hardwood floors. "Who is it?" A muffled voice came from the other side of the door. "My name's David. I'm staying next door and was wondering if I could speak with you for a minute." David spoke loudly, not knowing how Mr. Wilburn's hearing could be. "We are speaking now." "Yes, well, I was hoping we could speak face to face." David tried to keep calm after seeing Bobby hurt, but his irritation grew with the man's responses. "You hoped wrong. Now go away." Wow, you're really embracing that bitter old man stereotype, David thought, as he took a deep breath before continuing. "Look, I'm not here to cause any trouble. My son came home hurt after kicking his ball into your yard. My wife, Cynthia, and I..." "Cynthia?" The door opened just enough for David to get a look at Mr. Wilburn. Bobby wasn't kidding about the man looking like a resurrected corpse. However, Bobby didn't mention how tall this guy was. He must be well over 6 feet. "Sid has returned home? When?" The man's voice was more clear with the door partially opened, but still sounded like rocks grinding together. We arrived yesterday morning." David was caught off guard by the sudden interest in Cynthia. He shook his head to clear his thoughts. "Listen, as I was saying, my son Bobby kicked his ball into your yard and came home hurt. He said you tried to hit him with your cane?" Mr. Wilburn didn't respond at first. He just looked in the direction of Cynthia's parents' house, appearing lost in thought. Suddenly his eyes snapped back to David. "What cane?" David began to point at Mr. Wilburn's hands, but there was nothing in them. He could have sworn he had heard the cane earlier tapping on the floor, but he couldn't remember seeing it when Mr. Wilburn opened the door. You got me there, old man, he thought. I didn't see your son. I did, however, find a soccer ball and one of my windows broken. Now that you have admitted that it was indeed your son that kicked the ball, I expect you will be paying for it? Mr. Wilburn pointed a gnarled finger at him. Damn, he's good. I could have used a man like him at my law firm. Send me the bill when you get it. Until then, may I have my son's soccer ball back? No! David watched the door slam in front of his face. Sighing, he went home to explain to his wife how he had gotten outwitted by the crypt keeper. Sid? That doesn't make any sense. Only my father and grandfather ever called me that. Cynthia was perplexed by what David had told her. She couldn't fathom why Mr. Wilburn would call her Sid, much less ask questions about her returning. Your grandfather used to play chess at the park a lot. From what I heard, Mr. Wilburn used to frequent the park as well. Since your grandfather used to brag to all of his friends about how great you were becoming at chess, Mr. Wilburn probably heard him call you Sid, her mother offered. Maybe. Cynthia wasn't so sure. Something didn't feel right to her. She couldn't explain it, but it didn't feel like a coincidence. It was too bizarre that he would remember her nickname after all these years. I take it I'm not getting my ball back? Bobby asked. No, you are not getting your ball back. You are, however, going to do some extra chores to pay for that window. Bobby slumped in response. He had been hoping the broken window part wouldn't come up. Today was just not his day. He laid back in his chair, instantly regretting his actions, as searing pain shot across his injured abdomen. Yep, definitely not my day.
Chapter 3. Funeral. The light breeze stirred the ground around the graveyard. It caused little funnels here and there, sending multicolored leaves into the air to dance upon its currents. Unfortunately, the beauty of the scene was lost on all those gathered in front of the small tombstone. Their heads were bowed to hide tears that could not be stopped. This was not a day of joy. Cynthia shivered as the cold air chilled her bones. She pulled her heavy coat tighter in a failed attempt to stay warm. It seemed no matter how many layers one wore, there would be no warmth on this day. David moved to her side to at least block some of the wind while pulling her close to him. In front of them sat Cynthia's mother in a wheelchair, bundled in blankets. Occasionally, she would use a black handkerchief to dry her cheeks. Amen, the priest finished. Everyone repeated the word. Now the ceremony was over. Attendants gave their condolences to Cynthia and her mother. You did a wonderful job giving the eulogy, Cynthia. I'm sure your father is watching over us right now. Very proud of you, offered Mr. Baker. He had been her father's old business partner. Thank you. That means a lot, Cynthia replied politely, although she didn't feel she deserved the praise. When they asked her to say something, she was at a loss. Somehow, she managed to get words out without breaking down into complete babbling idiot. Next came the Dorseys, then the Hunts, followed by the Millhouses, and so on, until Cynthia had to excuse herself before losing all control of what little strength she had left. David took up the conversation with everyone to give her a break. She hid behind an above-ground tomb that resembled a small Gothic-looking house adorned with gargoyles, seeming forever tormented. The sorrowful structure provided her with both privacy and relief from the chilling bite of Jack Frost. Winter would be coming soon, which meant so would Christmas. Cynthia's entire body went into uncontrollable spasms as she thought about celebrating the holidays without her father. She became lightheaded, almost swooning. Bobby's voice pulled her back from the edge of unconsciousness. Cynthia saw him standing in front of the grave a little distance away from her. She sucked in her breath as sharply as she recognized the grave. It was her grandfather's. Mom, is this great-grandpa and grandma's graves? Bobby asked, seeing his mother approaching. Yes, Cynthia replied, as she put her arm around Bobby's shoulder. Thank goodness, I was just saying hello to them. Bobby never got to meet his great-grandparents. They died long before he was born. However, Cynthia always told stories about them, especially her grandfather. Bobby loved hearing them so much, he would often have her tell the stories instead of reading a book. Hello, Grandpa. I wish we were here for a better reason, like one of the picnics we used to have at the park. Flashes of billowing white puffy clouds slowly made their way across the ocean blue skies. Despite the chilled air, Cynthia could almost feel the warm summer breeze brushing against her 7-year-old face. Her eyes blurred at the memory of those days with her grandfather. Mom? Bobby's voice sounded as if it were far away. Cynthia looked at Bobby, his face distorted as if she was looking at him through a spyglass. Her hand and arm became elongated as she tried to reach out to him. The fingers of her hand looked alien as they squirmed. Mom! Cynthia heard the fear of Bobby's voice, even with it being muffled. She tried to call out to him, to tell him she was all right, but her mouth wouldn't open. Cynthia began to panic as she found herself suffocating. The world around her began to spin, and her legs felt like jelly. She felt herself falling. As a veil of darkness came over her, she thought she had seen a very tall old man with a cane in the far distance. He stood next to a large oak tree watching her. Then there was nothing. Cynthia knew her eyes were open. She could feel them moving and looking around. Yet she could see nothing, for everything was dark. No, not dark. Black, as if everything was erased from existence, even shades. She felt a slight breeze cross her skin, and the blackness became a gray mist swirling around her. It was as if she were in a storm cloud. At first, Cynthia could only see a few feet in front of her, but then the mist began to slowly part down the middle. She found herself walking into the divide. Looking down, her feet were hidden by the same gray mist. Something slowly came into view. It was a park bench. There was an elderly man sitting on it. Cynthia could only see the back of him, but instantly knew from how tidy his attire was that it was her grandfather. There was a brief flash of light, then she found herself sitting next to him on the bench. He stared into the distance as if lost in thought. There was something in his hands. Cynthia recognized it as the small glass walrus she had seen a million times on her grandfather's dresser. The last time she had seen it was in the attic the day she had found the chessboard. "Grandpa, it's Sid." "I thought I was the best chess player," her grandfather mumbled, appearing to have no acknowledgment of her. He fidgeted with the walrus between his fingers. "How stupid I was." "Grandpa, it's me," Cynthia called. This time she spoke even louder, but he still didn't break his stare that peered straight ahead. "He played on my ego," her grandfather continued. "That day in the park, the day he brought that wonderful chessboard, he knew I always admired it. It was a board suited for a champion, therefore it should have belonged to me. That bastard knew I wanted it, and that's why he brought it. It's almost like it was made just for me, something he knew I couldn't resist." "Grandpa, what are you talking about? Who is he?" Cynthia asked. She didn't know why she was here, and didn't care. She was just happy to see her grandfather again, but as soon as he had mentioned the chessboard, her fears came rushing back. Was it always going to come back to that chessboard? She listened as the words poured loosely. "I remembered when I had finally taken his king with my bishop, how his face had become so angry, how every one of my friends at the park kept patting me on the back, congratulating me on such a fine victory. It was a lie. It was a well-dressed charade." Her grandfather looked directly at her. Cynthia watched as his eyes grew wide and tears filled them. Her heart felt as if it would burst into a million pieces. She reached out to touch his face, but he grabbed her wrist tightly, stopping her. "You let me win to get to you," he breathed sharply. Cynthia gasped as he stared directly into her soul. The mist began to swirl violently, and her grandfather's form became transparent. She felt his grip on her wrist, released as he disappeared. The small glass walrus figurine fell from sight as she tried to grab it. Cynthia screamed as she felt her body get picked up and thrown around in circles. "Cynthia!" a distant voice yelled. She became nauseous as her body bounced along the currents. Closing her eyes tightly, she tried to fight the wind to stop its violent assault on her. "Cynthia!" The voice was much louder, growing close. She felt someone grab her shoulder, giving it a gentle shake. "Cynthia, please, God, Cynthia, wake up!" It was David's voice. Cynthia's eyes flew open to see him kneeling over her. His face was one of fear. He pulled her to him tightly, kissing her on the cheek repeatedly while telling her how much he loved her. When David finally let go of her, she saw that they were still in front of her grandparents' grave. Her mother, Bobby, and some of the other guests were off to the side watching with looks of concern. "Are you all right? What happened?" David asked as he helped her to her feet. "Yes, I'm fine. I must have just fainted," Cynthia lied. What happened to her was more than just exhaustion, but she couldn't figure it out right now. Not with everyone standing around watching. After apologizing to everyone, Cynthia excused her and her family by saying they needed to go home to mourn. As they left the cemetery, Cynthia glanced at the side mirror and saw the same old man with the cane from earlier. He was standing by the gates watching them drive away. When she turned to look out the back window, there was no one there. That's when she noticed Bobby, curled behind David's seat with his eyes closed tightly. Bobby saw him too. That had to mean Mr. Wilburn. Later that night, after David and Bobby had gone to bed, Cynthia sat with her mother on the couch. They sipped their Earl Grey tea as they reminisced about the past. Her mother only stuck to memories that were light-hearted, careful to stay away from any that might be too painful. Both had already shed enough tears for one day. "Mom, yesterday you said that Grandpa had won the chessboard from a man that he used to play in the park. However, Grandpa took me with him all the time so I could watch and learn. I don't ever remember seeing him play against anyone except his usual friends." Cynthia laid the used tea bag on the saucer. "How is it neither of us ever met this man?" "Well, that was probably because he always met the man on Saturdays. That was the day your father and I always did something with you. Remember all the things we used to do?" her mother asked, smiling as she tried remembering specific events. Cynthia found her smiling in return. Saturday had been their favorite day. It was the first non-school day of the week. That meant sleeping in and then waking up and watching cartoons. Then after breakfast, her parents would take her out and do something fun. Anything from having a picnic by the lake, ice cream at the 1950s diner, even a couple trips to the zoo. All the things she would never get to experience again with her father. She felt her esophagus start to close at the thought, causing her to take small, quick breaths. You okay, dear? You look pale all of a sudden, her mother asked, putting down her tea so she could take Cynthia's hand into hers. Yes, of course. Cynthia was getting good at lying to everyone, which caused a queasiness in her stomach. She would have to pray for forgiveness later. Right now, she needed answers to what had happened to her at the cemetery. Mom, you said that Mr. Wilburn used to hang out at the park as well. Is it possible that Mr. Wilburn is the same person Grandpa won the chessboard from? A pensive look crossed her mother's face as she tried to remember. I guess it could be possible. Your father and I never really talked to the Wilburns. Mrs. Wilburn never left the house, and I only saw Mr. Wilburn a few times in all these years. Except. Except what? Cynthia asked, coming forward as her mother began to trail off. Except there was one day I had come home from work, and your father told me that my dad had got into an intense argument with Mr. Wilburn. Apparently, you and your grandfather were playing chess in the backyard. He was teaching you some of his special moves, when Mr. Wilburn claimed that you should be taught by a real chess champion. Her mother laughed at this. Well, I can tell you that your grandfather would never let anyone teach you his game, nor would he ever let someone say he was not a champion. Your father had you go up to your room while he went to break up the argument between the two men. Your father said the last words Mr. Wilburn spoke to your grandfather were that one day you would play a real champion. I guess he didn't know you would stop playing after your grandfather passed. He let me win to get to you. That is what my grandfather had said. Was Mr. Wilburn the same man Grandpa played for the chessboard? If so, why did he let Grandpa win the chessboard to get to me? What do I have to do with any of this? She didn't have the answers. Worse, the more she tried to find the answers, the more questions popped into her head. Well, I'm beat, her mother said, after letting out a long yawn. Can you be a dear and help me to bed? Of course, Cynthia replied, getting up to help her mother. Cynthia handed her mother a cup of water from the nightstand to wash down her medicine. Then she tucked her mother in before turning out the light and shutting the door behind her. After she put the teacups into the kitchen sink, she went to the front door to make sure it was locked. Cynthia jumped at the sudden sound of thunder, waiting for her pulse to stop pounding in her ears. She looked out the front window to see it was raining. Another crash of thunder, followed by a bolt of lightning, temporarily dispelling the darkness. Every muscle in Cynthia's body tensed and became taut as she tried hard not to move. In the flash of lightning, she saw the tall old man standing in the street, leaning on his cane. His stark white wisp of hair stood on end as the wind whipped around him. Fear grasped her heart in its deathly grip. Then the lightning flashed a couple more times, but the man was gone. Chapter 4. Operation Retrieval. Bobby glanced at a rooster clock next to a matching thermometer hen on the living room wall. It was almost 2 p.m. That meant his time in homework jail was almost over. He had thought when they left Florida to come up here for the next month, he would be free of his schoolwork woes. Not having to do math and English would have been worth missing his friends for. Bobby wasn't that lucky, and was disappointed when his parents announced to him that all his teachers had given him work he could do while he was gone. It was at that moment that he knew that the powers that ruled the universe were out to get him. They were probably sitting high in the sky laughing at him as they toyed with his life. Bobby, is everything all right, dear? His grandmother asked, disturbing his thoughts on how he was going to escape the universe's cruel wrath. Fine, Grandma, Bobby replied softly, while giving her the best fake smile he could muster. Happy with this response, she went back to watching her bird documentary on the television. Bobby heard a car pull up in the driveway. That would be his parents returning from the lawyer's office. They had gone there to have the executor finalize his grandfather's will. His parents walked in, closing the front door behind them. Bobby could tell his mother had been crying due to the redness around her eyes. She gave him a weak smile before kissing his grandmother on the cheek. How did everything go, dear? His grandmother asked, concerned, causing his mother to well up. Hey, sport, you can stop doing your homework for today. Why don't you go outside to play for a while? His father offered. Bobby knew that this was his father's way of telling him that the adults needed to speak without his little ears listening in. Grabbing his coat and old tennis ball, he went outside to play. Bobby had been bouncing the tennis ball out the garage door when he saw Tyler and another boy coming towards him. He waited until they were near the driveway before he decided to acknowledge them. So, what? You're coming back to see if I was still alive after you left me for dead? Bobby asked angrily. At that moment, he felt a sudden urge growing to throw the tennis ball at Tyler's head. I'm sorry, Tyler apologized, looking ashamed. But you aren't from around here. You don't know the legends about Old Man Wilburn and his wife. She used to be a real witch. Bobby gave the boys a distrustful look that said he wasn't buying any of it, though he did agree that Mr. Wilburn was creepy and scary, in the Night of the Living Dead kind of way. Bobby even had a nightmare about the old man after he had seen him with his cane watching them drive out of the cemetery, but he refused to believe in witches, ghosts, or ghouls like other kids his age did. It's true, the other boy confirmed. My father said so. He said Mrs. Wilburn had put a spell on his friend. Well, unless you have a spell to get my soccer ball back, Bobby shot out, then I don't want anything to do with either of you, or any of this ridiculous witch nonsense. Our friend Mark might be able to help with the ball, Tyler offered, ignoring Bobby's annoyed words and demeanor. He loves doing dangerous things for attention. Right, Brad? Bobby looked at Brad, and the boy nodded vigorously in agreement. He was doubtful they could help, especially Tyler. However, he did want his ball back, and it wouldn't hurt to listen to their plan. Tyler's face lit up as Bobby agreed to listen, thinking that he had earned Bobby's friendship back. Bobby ran back inside to let his parents know that he was going to Brad's house for lunch and would be back later. Before they could respond, he was already running back out the door to join the boys. An hour later, the boys were in Brad's backyard listening to Mark's plan on how to get Bobby's ball back. At first, Bobby didn't know what to make of Mark. The boy had arrived while they were eating pizza that Brad's mother had ordered for them. Mark was taller than all of them by a couple inches. He was on the stocky side, with long black hair that went all the way down his back. The clothes he wore looked like something from the heavy metal bands Bobby's mother used to listen to, before she had decided to try being a better role model. To top it off, Mark smoked cigarettes. He was only 13. So that's the plan. What do you think? Mark asked, sitting back in his chair, smiling like he was the smartest person in the world. Tyler and Brad looked at Mark as if he were some kind of legendary superhero. Bobby, on the other hand, had a different opinion of him. This isn't a plan, this is suicide, Bobby said, sarcastically, before choking on the smoke from Mark's cigarette. You want me and you to break into Mr. Wilburn's house while he's gone, with Tyler and Brad as lookouts? The same Tyler who took off running to save his own butt while leaving me to die? No thank you. Tyler's shoulders slumped at the reminder of his cowardice. Bobby chose to ignore him. He was more focused on the stupidity of the plan and felt it was his duty to tell them exactly how insane it really was. Do you have a better idea? Mark shot back. If not, then we either do this or you can kiss your soccer ball goodbye. How do we even know Mr. Wilburn won't be home tonight? Bobby asked, his resolve on not doing the plan starting to weak. Because every Saturday, Mr. Wilburn goes to the park to play chess in the afternoon. Then at 7 p.m., he goes to the cemetery to visit his wife's grave. He's always there for 2 hours. I know because I hang out there and always see him, Mark replied, his voice brimming with confidence. Bobby looked at Tyler and Brad, who sat there wide-eyed as they looked upon Mark with even more admiration. He could understand why. Mark dressed like a rock star, smoked like one, and now revealed he hangs out in graveyards. They would do whatever he told them to do without question. Bobby, on the other hand, saw the boy as a future convict, one that was now trying to turn him into one by breaking and entering into an old man's house. Bobby saw all three of them watching with a silent intensity and caused tiny beads of sweat to break out upon his brow. Butterflies also fought within his stomach at the thought of breaking into the house of the person that had tried to bash his brains out only 2 days earlier. Then there was the thought of what his parents would do if he did get caught. Bobby, staring at the three of them as they stared back, finally threw his hands in the air. Fine, whatever, let's do it, he said, caving to the peer pressure. The boys started hooting and hollering as they circled Bobby, patting him on the back. Their response was so intoxicating that he found himself smiling as he held his head high, as if he had just performed some unbelievable daredevil stunt. They got so loud in their exuberance that Brad's mother came to check on them to make sure everything was all right. What took you so long? Tyler asked in a hushed tone as Bobby met up with him. The three boys had been waiting for Bobby down the street, behind the bushes in the neighbor's front yard. They were all supposed to meet 30 minutes ago and was worried Bobby had changed his mind, not to mention it was already dark outside, and none of them wanted to admit how scared they were. My mom almost didn't let me come. I had to convince her that I was going over to your house, Tyler, to watch a movie, Bobby replied. He still couldn't figure out why his mother had been so adamant about not letting him go. His parents always let him go over to a friend's house back home. This time she almost seemed to panic when he just mentioned going outside. It wasn't until his grandmother intervened, saying that the neighborhood was completely safe, and to let him have some fun with his new friends. That's when his mother hesitantly agreed. Maybe we should call this off, Tyler replied. It was obvious to everyone that Tyler didn't have a brave bone in his body. No! Mark practically screamed, causing them to make hushing noises at him. Lowering his voice, he continued, "No one is backing out now. I will beat the crap out of anyone that does. Understand?" All of them nodded as they saw Mark ball his fists. Now that Mark had settled that, he handed them all walkie-talkies that his father, who was a firefighter, gave him for his birthday. They were well used and had numbers and handles engraved on the sides. They went over the plan one more time. Tyler would stand guard at the west end of the street, while Brad would stand guard at the east. Mark and Bobby would be the ones actually going into Old Man Wilburn's house to get Bobby's ball. They all gave each other a military salute before heading to their assigned positions. "I'm in position, over." Tyler's voice was shaky, but it came through clear. "Same over here, Wolfman out," Brad replied. "Wait, we get to use code names? No one said we were using code names," Tyler exclaimed. It was evident that he was not happy that no one told him about using code names. "We're not using code names, over," Bobby insisted, now regretting this whole plan. "You want code names? Fine. All your code names are Dumbass 1, 2, and 3. Now shut the hell up before I come pound your dumbass heads in," Mark threatened. Even in the dark, Bobby could see a smile on Mark's face as radio silence followed. Mark then climbed over the fence to unlock it from that side, letting Bobby in. The path illuminated with the help of the crescent moon as they made their way to the backyard. Mark squatted down near a small window at the ground level that led to the basement of the house. Before Bobby could stop him, Mark kicked in the window, sending shards of broken glass flying. "What are you doing?" Bobby whispered sharply while looking back at his own house nervously. He half expected to see his parents come storming out of the back door to drag him home by the scruff of his neck. "What? We have to get in somehow." Mark gave Bobby a look that indicated the answer should have been obvious. "So your idea was to break the window and draw attention to us? Seriously? If that was the case, why didn't we just go through the window my soccer ball went through?" Bobby could see enough of Mark's face in the moonlight to watch his expression change as the realization kicked in. Mark shrugged, then offered to let Bobby go in first. "Again, seriously? How am I going to fit?" He wasn't about to shove himself into something again that he clearly didn't fit through. The current pain around his stomach from earlier encounter at the fence was an easy reminder. Mark looked at Bobby's waist and then at the small window, then back at Bobby. At that moment, Bobby fought hard to stop the urge to scream at the top of his lungs. Taking deep breaths to calm down, he walked away from Mark without another word. Bobby inspected the window his ball had gone through. It was too high for them to climb up and to enter, not to mention getting through the sharp broken glass still fixed to the frame. The blue tarp that Mr. Wilburn must have put up to cover the hole moved a little as a slight breeze came through. The sound the wind and the tarp made was eerie, combined with the moonlight reflecting off the skeleton-looking tree nearby only heightened Bobby's trepidation. Finding his courage, he pushed onward to the back porch, since that seemed to be the only option left to try. He just hoped Mr. Wilburn didn't lock it. Why would he? No one would be so stupid as to try and break into this psycho's house. Bobby shook his head at the irony of his own thoughts. Bobby climbed a few steps to the porch. He winced as the rotten wood moaned under his weight. Gently grabbing the screen door, he slowly pulled it open. A loud, squeaking sound from the rusted hinges sent him cringing even more. I wonder how burglars do this without getting caught. Do they send out an inspector to check the place for any creepy-ass noises first? "Still clear! Dumbass 2 out!" Bobby clamped a hand over his mouth to stifle a scream. In this poorly executed attempt at being quiet as a ninja, he had forgotten about Brad and Tyler. The volume knob on the walkie-talkie must have gotten turned up somehow, so when Brad's voice came through, it was loud. He quickly turned the volume down. "From now on, only use these to call out if you see Mr. Wilburn. Understand?" "You forgot to say, Dumbass 3 out!" Bobby's fist shook with anger as he heard Brad giggling before the radio went silent again. Ripping the screen door open all the way, he stormed to the back door, not caring about the noise anymore. "Damn it!" he explained, as his hand couldn't turn the locked doorknob. Bobby froze as he heard something move on the other side of the door. There was a small window on this side, but all he could see was the darkness. Leaning a little closer to the window, he squinted as he tried to look in. "Ah!" Bobby screamed as an illuminated face appeared right before his. Adrenaline dumped into his bloodstream as he fought his legs to move. When they finally did, he stumbled backwards, falling hard onto his tailbone. He let out a cry of pain as he grabbed his butt and rolled around. The back door opened, and there stood Mark, holding a small flashlight. "What the hell are you doing making all this noise? Are you trying to get us caught?" "Me?" Bobby yelled back. He was getting tired of having his heart trying to pound its way out of his chest. Mark didn't reply, only waved to him angrily for him to hurry up and follow. Mumbling a bunch of swear words under his breath, Bobby slowly stood, brushing the dirt off of himself. The crow in the tree watched the two boys enter the house. Brad sat on the curb tossing rocks at the storm drain across the street. He was imagining that the rocks were really grenades and that he was a war hero. Every time one of the rock grenades hit against the metal of the storm drain and slid in, it was blowing up the enemy, which in his case were his mother's garden gnomes. He hated those things with a passion. Brad believed that one day all those gnomes were going to come alive and turn him into one of them. He just knew it. Ba-boom! Brad made exploding gestures with his hands as a rock grenade found its mark between the grates. Take that, you heathen scum! A crow watched from atop a tree branch. Tyler bit down hard, trying to keep his teeth from chattering. There was a chill in the air that had begun only a few minutes ago, but that was not what had his teeth rapidly banging against each other. The darkness seemed to close in around him, threatening to kill off the moon's light in a morbid attempt to cast him into utter darkness. A small wind had picked up, causing the half-barren tree branches to move above and around him. This effect elicited sounds of a moaning echo that sounded like souls being horribly tortured. Their cries for help went unanswered. Tyler's eyes darted side to side in an attempt to watch every shadow around him, expecting at any moment for ghastly demons to spawn so they could devour his soul. Not for the first time since they had all separated, Tyler thought about running home and leaving the others to their fate. A crow watched from the nearby rooftop. Chapter 5: Mission Impossible. The back entry led directly into the kitchen, where Bobby immediately covered his nose with the front of his shirt. He couldn't explain the stench that assailed his delicate nostrils, but it was worse than anything he had ever smelled before. Even that time he had been sprayed by a skunk didn't compare to this. Mark seemed unfazed by the smell. Instead, he handed the flashlight to Bobby as he made his way to the refrigerator. Awesome, Mark exclaimed upon opening the refrigerator door to find bottles of beer on the top shelf. He quickly grabbed one and pulled down a plate of whatever looked like leftovers from the second shelf. What do you think you're doing? Bobby asked incredulously. What does it look like? Mark replied as he sat down at the table, opening the beer. We're here to get my ball and get the hell out of here, Bobby scolded, as loud as he dared. Then get to looking. It is your ball, after all. I'm going to fill up a little first. Then I'll join you. Mark waved the beer in a salute. Besides, I only have one flashlight. Unbelievable, Bobby muttered under his breath. He had known this was a bad plan from the start. I should have trusted my gut. But now that he was in the thick of it, he pressed on without Mark. Bobby aimed the flashlight down the length of the daunting hallway, casting eerie effects on the many pictures that lined both walls. One picture caught his eye specifically. He stopped, shining light directly onto it. There was a man and a woman standing side by side, with neutral expressions. The photo was in black and white, only heightening the age of it. The background looked like something from Bobby's history books. There was an engraving on a metal plate at the bottom of the frame. It read, Mr. and Mrs. Wilburn, 1832. Impossible, Bobby breathed. That would make them well over 100 years old. It must be their parents. It was the only reasonable explanation he could think of, though he couldn't deny the amazing similarity between the man and Mr. Wilburn. Bobby continued down the hall until he entered the living room. Doing a quick sweep with the flashlight revealed a room in the great disarray. It looked as if it hadn't been cleaned in decades. There were old yellow-stained newspapers strewn about, along with dishes caked with dried food piled up here and there. That explains the smell. Sort of. Being careful where he stepped, Bobby searched the room for any signs of a soccer ball. As he suspected, it wasn't there. You didn't think it would be that easy, did you? He thought to himself. Shining the light at the staircase that was off to the side left him with two choices. The upstairs where the bedrooms were, or the basement. After a brief battle of eeny, meeny, miny, mo, his course was laid out. Letting out a little sigh of relief, he began to climb the stairs to the bedrooms. Bobby didn't know what he would have done if it had been the basement. Once again, his weight caused the wooden steps to groan, sending shivers up his spine. As he slowly climbed each step, Bobby tried to convince himself that he had nothing to fear. Mr. Wilburn was at the cemetery visiting his late wife. That meant nobody was home. Brad threw another rock grenade at the crow he had recently spotted. The bird stared hard at him as the rock flew wide of its mark. Oh, that's how you want to play. Okay, I got something for you, Brad called as he began searching intensely for the right-shaped rock with perfect aerodynamics. There would be no way he could miss then. Victory would be his. Two headlights some distance behind Brad, outside his view, turned off. The crow cawed twice. That's it. Keep mouthing off, Brad replied as his hands ran over some smooth stones. Aha! Now you're going to pay. Brad stood up while cocking his arm back behind his head for a perfect throw. His body froze. He had heard what sounded like a cane tapping on the road somewhere behind him. His ears strained to hear the noise again, but all was now silent. Brad felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end as adrenaline pumped through his veins. I didn't hear anything, just my imagination. Yeah, just my imagination. Brad bolted straight ahead without looking back. He thought about radioing for help, but cursed when he realized that he had left the walkie-talkie behind. It didn't matter, for he was already panting hard as he ran, and didn't think he could speak even if he tried. A dark, shadowy object swooped by his head, almost causing him to fall. Brad glanced over his shoulder and saw it was the crow. It was now circling around for another attack. He lowered his head like a ram while letting his fear-filled legs drive him home. Brad was hit hard in the back of his head, causing his forward momentum to spiral out of control. He fell to the ground, skidding some distance, tearing up his hands and face. Brad cried out in pain as he tried to get to his feet, but the crow attacked again, this time latching its razor-sharp claws onto his scalp. Searing pain shot across his head as blood ran into his eyes, mixing with his abundance of new tears. Brad tried to use the flailing arms method to shoo the black demon away, but it was useless. The crow seemed to find one opening after another with its sharp beak and claws. Brad quickly found himself unable to see at all. He curled up in the fetal position, praying for it all to end. As if his prayers were answered, the attack stopped. Brad lay there balled up for a moment before uncurling. He tried desperately to use his shirt to clear his eyes, but all he managed to do was clear them enough to see blurry shadows. Then the chanting began. Hivna, Hypno, Krinik, Slitronos. As the last word was spoken, Brad felt his skin tighten. Pain exploded through him as his bones began to compress in on themselves. He tried his best to move, do anything, but his body was no longer his to command. From what little he could see, it looked like everything around him was getting bigger. No, everything isn't getting bigger. I'm getting smaller. Bobby decided to check the first door he came upon. With a steady breath, he turned the knob, slowly pushing the door open. His gag reflex twitched involuntarily as the strong odor hit him fully. The smell from when they had first entered the house was nothing compared to this. It was indescribable. He pulled his shirt up over his nose and mouth in a feeble attempt at a barrier against the foulness. Starting from his right, Bobby shined the small beam from the flashlight in a sweeping motion. The first thing it exposed was a small table in the corner in front of an old, beat-up chair. Upon the table sat a chessboard layered in dust. Bobby approached and looked at the pieces that remained standing. He didn't know much about how to play the game. His friends had tried to get him to play a couple of times, but when his mother found out, she was adamant that he would never play the game again. Since Bobby really didn't care to play, he never asked why she was so against it. Bobby saw that the black king was lying on its side while the white bishop was standing in its place. He knew enough of the game to know that whoever had been playing the black pieces had lost. Just as he was about to continue his search, Bobby noticed something marked on the corner of the board. He used his thumb to wipe the dust off to see what it was. He jerked his hand back quickly at an intense, sudden stinging of pain. Bobby shined the light on his thumb. There was a small bead of blood. Looking back at the board, he saw a weird symbol of what appeared to be a crow and snake intertwined. What the hell? Bobby's eyes went wide as a drop of his blood on the board rolled to the symbol where it was then absorbed. The board began to vibrate, causing dust to fly into the air, pulling the moisture from Bobby's eyes as he painfully tried to blink. When he couldn't, he realized his entire body was now paralyzed. The chess piece rose one by one. They flew in all directions, in and around each other as if they were performing at a macabre ball. That's when Bobby realized that it wasn't a dance. The pieces were jockeying for a position. As if on cue, the pieces began lining up on the board in their rightful place. When the last piece sat down, the board stopped vibrating. Bobby was left gazing upon a pristine chessboard, with the pieces all shining and ready to start a new game. Scared to death, adrenaline shot through Bobby, allowing control of his body once more. He turned to run and smacked right into a lumbering form. Bobby was about to let out a scream when a hand clamped over his mouth, stifling him. As he tried to break free from whatever demon had been sent to kill him, he was pulled in, tightly, against it. "Shh! It's me!" Mark whispered. "Keep quiet, someone's in the house." Bobby didn't think it was possible to become more terrified than after seeing what he had just witnessed. But Mark's revelation had enough to send his 12-year-old heart into cardiac arrest. "I knew this was a stupid plan. Now, I'm going to get killed, and my body will probably be used in some stupid and sick blood sacrifice to whatever hellspawn old man Wilburn worships." Mark closed the door, leaving just a crack to peek out before turning to Bobby. Taking the flashlight, he did a quick sweep of the room, looking for maybe a window they might be able to escape out of. What the boys found was something out of a horror movie. There were arcane symbols, along with writing in what appeared to be another language, scrawled all over the walls. In a corner, there was an altar that looked like it was made from bones. On top of it were rotten chicken heads that looked like they had been left there for years. Bobby realized that was where the smell was coming from and couldn't hold back his gag reflexes anymore. Vomit shot out of his nose and mouth, spraying the room. Mark jumped out of the way just in time to keep from being showered with the chunks. However, his actions caused him to fall back into the shelf lined with books, which fell to the floor from the impact. The boys froze, not daring to even breathe. They knew there was no way the noise wasn't heard by whoever was in the house with them. "We have to get out of here now," Bobby whispered harshly before peeking out of the door to see if anyone was coming. Seeing no one, he exited the room, heading to the staircase, not even waiting to see if Mark was behind him. Bobby stopped with his hand on the handrail. He could hear the tap of the cane hitting the floor coming towards them. "Mr. Wilburn, he has us trapped." Bobby turned once again, running into Mark. Grabbing him by the arm, Bobby dragged the older boy with him back down the hallway into a different room. They shut the door quietly behind them, locking it. Turning the flashlight on, they scanned the room. "Window!" Mark ran to it and smiled when it opened with ease. Bobby's expression was much different when he joined Mark. They were 2 stories up with no way to get down, other than jumping to what surely should be their death. He indicated to Mark to help him with the bed sheets. Just like many movies that the boys had seen, they tied the 2 sheets together, creating a homemade rope. They heard the wooden steps of the stairs creak. This only spurred the boys' progress. With one end of the sheet tied to the end of the bedpost, the other end was thrown out the window, where it only reached halfway down the house. The doorknob shook as someone attempted to open the door. "I'm first," Mark yelled as he grabbed the sheet before climbing up. Bobby's heart jumped as something slammed against the door. Indecision and fear caused hesitation. Looking back and forth from the window to the door made him wish he never left his house today. The door burst open, causing small splinters of wood to fly across the room. Mr. Wilburn's tall frame filled the doorway. His ghastly appearance was only made more horrifying by the small amount of moonlight coming from the window, accentuating his sunken features. Bobby practically jumped out of the window while trying to grab hold of the sheet rope. Once he felt the sheet in his hand, he held on to it for dear life. This caused him to slam hard into the side of the house as the wind was knocked out of him. He released his hold. Bobby fell the rest of the way down, landing on something before hitting the ground. "Ow!" Mark explained as he took the full force of Bobby's weight onto him. Feeling guilty about leaving Bobby behind, Mark had stayed to help Bobby when he came down. Unfortunately, he did not expect Bobby to come down so fast, landing on top of him. Both boys groaned in pain as they fought to untangle themselves. Once they were free of each other, they looked up. Mr. Wilburn's snarling visage hung out the window, spurring the boys to take off running. The old man thought about sending his crows after the fleeing boys, but thought better of it. He didn't want to draw too much attention. Besides, he had already taken care of one of them. The rest would soon follow in due time. Letting his anger dissipate, he began searching to see if they had stolen anything of importance. Nothing was found out of place until the old man entered what his wife used to refer to as her special workshop. He found the floor littered with books covered in vomit. The old man felt his ire returning at the sight. "They dare come to this sacred place and desecrate it? I will make every one of those little shits pay." Suddenly that rage became one of glee as the old man saw the chessboard. His entire body tingled with excitement as he approached it. The board had been restored, ready to be played yet again. "Ignat Topin Crew," he whispered. The symbol in the corner briefly flared. "Oh, my Sid, did your little brat get his blood? Your blood on my board?" The old man threw his head back while cackling loudly at the ceiling. Once his demonic laughter subsided, he looked upon the board. "Your move." Bobby and Mark sprinted down the street, not daring to look over their shoulder in fear that somehow that crippled old man would be right behind them. Finally, they collapsed on a grassy area, their legs no longer able to carry them. Panting heavily, they tried to gulp down large amounts of air to fill their burning lungs. When they were able to breathe normally again, they risked a look behind them. Relief flooded both boys when there was nothing there. "Hey, are you guys all right?" Tyler asked as he joined Bobby and Mark. "I was getting so worried, so I came to check on you." "Why didn't you just use the radio?" Mark asked as he climbed to his feet. "Because you gave me a radio with dying batteries. That's why," Tyler retorted angrily. Bobby was impressed. He had figured that Tyler would run home as soon as they left him earlier. However, not only did Tyler not run, but he also came to check on them and stood up to Mark. Climbing to his feet, Bobby asked, "Where's Brad?" When Bobby only got a shrug from Tyler, he used his walkie-talkie to call Brad. After several attempts without success, the boys decided to go find him. However, once they reached the area where Brad was stationed, there was no sign of him. "Probably ran home like the chicken he is," Mark laughed. "Yeah, there seems to be a lot of that tonight." Bobby couldn't help the jab, especially after Mark had bailed on him. "Still, I would have expected that from Tyler, but not from Brad." "Hey!" Tyler exclaimed, offended. Well, if he did run home, there's nothing we can do about it now, Bobby continued, ignoring Tyler's glare. Not that it matters. This night was a total bust. Not only did we almost get killed, but we still didn't get my ball back, which was the whole purpose. I wouldn't say it was a total bust. Mark smiled as he pulled a small book out of the front of his pants. I got us a little souvenir that we might be able to use as a bargaining chip. You stole that? Tyler asked in disbelief. Great. You didn't think that breaking and entering wasn't a big enough crime, so you decided to add theft to the list? Bobby asked sarcastically. My parents are going to kill me when they find out they raised a criminal. With Dad being a lawyer, I don't stand a chance. Speaking of parents, he needed to get back home before they were worried about him being out so long. Fine, I'll keep it for myself. It looks like a pretty cool book. Mark caressed it while admiring the raised symbol on the front of it, the same symbol Bobby noted that was on the chessboard. No, I'll take it. Bobby bravely grabbed the book out of Mark's hand. Maybe I can find some way to get it back to the old man without him knowing it was taken. For now, we all go home, never speaking of this to anyone. Agreed? After all of them agreed to keep quiet about what had transpired that evening, they separated for the night. Bobby expected the police to be at his house when he arrived, but when he entered, his mother and grandmother were sitting on the couch watching TV, while his father was doing work in Grandpa's office. After answering his mother's questions on how everything went, he excused himself, saying he ate over at Tyler's and needed to take a bath. Both his parents looked at him questionably. Bobby silently scolded himself at the slip-up. He never turned down a meal, and the only time he took a bath was when they made him. Smiling, Bobby hurried to the bathroom where he locked the door behind him, before breathing a sigh of relief. Bobby sat on the bed, dressed in his new flamingo-decorated pajamas his grandmother had bought for him. He didn't know what her obsession with birds was, but he suspected he would never get to the bottom of that mystery. Instead, he focused the attention on the book lying in front of him. The cover was black, and it felt unlike any book he had ever touched. It felt like leather, but at the same time not like leather. It was definitely an enigma, not wanting to touch a symbol after what had happened when he had touched the chessboard. Bobby carefully opened the cover. At first, he thought he was looking at some kind of cookbook. There appeared to be recipes in an arcane language. Bobby's eyes widened as he gasped in shock. He knew what this book was. The writing on the room's walls, the symbol on the board absorbing his blood, the chess pieces flying about. It was a spell book. Chapter 6. Missing. Bobby let out a long yawn before digging into the stack of pancakes his father had just loaded on his plate. He had been up most of the night reading the spellbook by flashlight under his covers. Some of it was written in English, so much so that he couldn't put it down until he had finished everything that could be read. Still, his tiredness wasn't going to stop him from devouring his father's light, fluffy pancakes. Easy there, sport. Don't put so much in your mouth at one time. There are plenty of pancakes for everyone. No need to risk choking to death, his father teased. Who could that be at this early hour? Claire asked, in between sips of her coffee. Probably Mr. Wilburn with his bill for the window, David replied dryly. I will see who it is, Cynthia offered, getting up to answer the door. Wait, look out the window first. If it is him, we can all pretend like we are not here, David joked, drawing giggles from both Bobby and Claire. Cynthia just gave him a stern look. Calvin, Cynthia asked, surprised when she opened the door to find her old classmate standing there. Cynthia, hi, it's me. Calvin offered his hand. Cynthia shook it absently as she tried to wrap her head around seeing her old friend after all these years. Calvin had been her classmate since kindergarten and had always been so sweet to her. Even though she never told him, Cynthia had a huge crush on him for the longest time back then. It didn't matter, though, for he always had eyes on Ellie. Calvin also had been the first child to disappear after she lost her first chess piece, to what she believed had been an evil spirit pretending to be her dead grandfather. When she had won the game, he, along with everyone else that had disappeared, returned, but without any memory of what had happened, making her many times since question if it had really ever happened at all. I'm sorry, please come in, Cynthia insisted, realizing she had been silent for way too long. Calvin accepted the offer graciously. Cynthia introduced Calvin to David and Bobby. Her mother, of course, already knew him, having been friends with his parents. I'm sorry to hear about Mr. Meyer. Trace and I tried to make it to the funeral, but we both couldn't get the day off from work, Calvin offered solemnly. It's fine, dear. You're here now. That's all that matters. Claire took his hand while giving him a reassuring smile that all was well. Yes, about that. I wish my presence here was a more casual one. Unfortunately, I am here because my son Brad didn't come home last night. Calvin choked back tears that wanted to be free. We called the police, but they can't do anything until he's been missing for 24 hours. Cynthia and Claire gasped at the news. David, on the other hand, seeing that Calvin was about to collapse, quickly grabbed a chair, helping the tortured man sit down. After Calvin regained his composure, he told them how Brad said he was going out to play with friends. When his curfew of 9 p.m. came around and he didn't come home, they began calling around, but no one had seen him. Tyler's parents had said that Tyler had only seen Brad earlier that day when they were all at the house eating pizza. That's what led Calvin here. Bobby had been with them then. So when I found out that Bobby was your son, I came over to check to see if he might know anything, Calvin finished. Bobby felt like disappearing into his chair as all eyes turned to him. Here comes the hellfire. But then he realized if Tyler said he didn't know anything, why should he? When he told his mother he was going to Tyler's to watch a movie, he hadn't said anything about Brad or Mark being with them. It was also obvious that Tyler was sticking to their agreement about not saying anything. Why shouldn't he? Bobby let out a sigh of relief when he saw everyone bite onto his story that he didn't see Brad again after leaving that afternoon. Now, he just hoped that no one would ask Tyler's mother if he had watched a movie over there. Guilt did run through Bobby knowing that Brad was now missing because of him. Bobby just hoped that Mr. Wilburn didn't do something to Brad. As the adults turned their attention back on each other, Bobby took the opportunity to sneak out of the room into the hallway. He stayed there to listen in on their conversation. The adults talked for a while longer until Calvin excused himself, saying he needed to check with the rest of the neighbors. Bobby's parents offered to help, but Calvin said he would call if anything changed. "Oh, Lord, I sure hope they find Brad. That poor little boy must be so scared right now," Claire offered. "He's such a good kid, just like Calvin was growing up. Remember, Cynthia, how your teacher, Mrs. Patterson, used to always brag about him growing up to be famous for doing some noble act of kindness?" "Yes," Cynthia replied absently. A dozen thoughts were racing through her mind. Calvin was the first to disappear years ago. Now his son? This only started after I came back home. Is it too much of a coincidence? Her grandfather's words during the cemetery visit haunted her again. Why is this happening to me again? I won the chess game. It was over. "Cynthia, what's wrong?" David asked gently, grabbing her shoulders. The look in his eyes was still filled with genuine concern. "I'm fine. Just in shock that Calvin's son is missing." Cynthia grabbed her coat from the rack. "I'm going to see if I can catch up to Calvin and help." Before anyone could respond, Cynthia was out the door running to catch up with her childhood friend. She didn't have far to go, for Calvin was knocking on Mr. Wilburn's door. He stopped when he saw her coming. "I want to help you if you don't mind," she offered. Calvin accepted her offer before knocking on the door once again. Only silence greeted them. Cynthia looked around the porch, not knowing what to say while they waited. She spotted the weirdest-looking garden gnome she had ever seen before. It wasn't dressed in the typical gnome fashion. The pointy hat was missing, along with the brightly colored clothes. This one was dressed in more modern attire, something like the clothes Bobby wore. As she looked closer, a feeling of uneasiness came over her. The face of the gnome looked almost like a human boy. There was what looked like dark red paint splattered on the figure's face, making it hard to make out its exact features. Still, the very realistic characteristics instilled the urge for her to run far away from it. "Ah!" Cynthia screamed as something touched her shoulder. When she turned to see Calvin looking at her confused, she realized that he had been trying to get her attention. "Sorry." "No, it's okay. Mr. Wilburn's house always gave me the creeps when I was a kid as well." He smiled. "It doesn't look like he is home anyway. Let's try the next door." As they walked down the driveway, Cynthia couldn't help but give the gnome one last look. There was something about it she couldn't shake. Tearing her eyes away, she turned her attention back to Calvin. "How much do you remember about the Wilburns?" "Very little. Once I went trick-or-treating with Ellie. Do you remember her?" he asked. How could she not? Cynthia couldn't stand little Miss Know-It-All. She always had her hand raised in the air, ready to show how much smarter she was than the rest of them. Cynthia had tried on several occasions to make friends with Ellie, but Ellie always felt she was too good to be seen with someone like her. "Right," Calvin nodded, seeing the look on Cynthia's face. "Well, when we were 6, Ellie forced me to stop at Mr. Wilburn's house that night. She believed Mrs. Wilburn was a real-life witch and wanted to see for herself. I tried to dissuade her, but after my attempts failed, we ended up going anyway." Ellie was always a stubborn one. Cynthia couldn't help but to throw the quip out there. Well, that stubbornness got what she wanted. Sort of. Mrs. Wilburn was the one that opened the door that night. I don't like to speak ill of anyone, but Mrs. Wilburn looked like something straight out of a horror story. A shudder ran through Calvin's body as the image of the wretched thing flashed through his mind. Her skin was paper-thin with dark brown patches all over it, as if she was actually rotting away. All of her teeth that had been remaining were black as night and produced a foul odor that almost made me puke back up all the candy I had eaten. "Maybe it was just a costume," Cynthia offered. "It was Halloween after all." "That's what I thought at first." He shook his head as if trying to force the images out, but Ellie reached out and grabbed Mrs. Wilburn's arm, I guess in an attempt to see if it was real. Mrs. Wilburn had let out a scream unlike anything I had ever heard before. Calvin stopped, turning to look Cynthia straight in the eyes. At first, she was caught off guard by the intensity of his stare. Then she realized he was terrified as he remembered. Cynthia, it sounded like what you would imagine 100 screaming, tortured souls would sound like. His trembling intensified. It was then that her son, at least I believe he was her son, because he looked to be about half her age, ripped the door all the way open and started screaming at us to get off the property. We took off running down the driveway. Mrs. Wilburn screamed something at us in some bizarre language we didn't understand. When she had finished, Ellie was struck in the back of the head with something. We didn't see what it was at the time. We were too scared to look back. My God, Cynthia breathed. At first, we thought Mrs. Wilburn had put a curse on us, he continued. But as time went on and nothing happened, we forgot all about it. Until. Until what? Cynthia asked. She could see that Calvin was struggling with something and didn't want to push him, especially with his son now missing, but she needed answers. Everything kept coming back to the Wilburns. Do you remember when we graduated to junior high? Ellie didn't graduate with us, he asked hesitantly. Yes, but that was because she and her parents moved, Cynthia remembered her mother had said something about it back then. They didn't move exactly, Calvin admitted. Ellie started losing her mind, slowly at first, but then it started progressing by the time we finished grade school. Her parents decided it was best to have her put in the mental hospital to get the help she needed. The only reason I knew what really happened was because my parents took me to go see her. Apparently, she kept scrawling my name all over her walls. Calvin had to stop as he relived that day. Cynthia reached out to hold his hands. She could feel them trembling within hers. Another shudder ran through him while he struggled with his emotions. They thought that maybe I could find out what was going on with her, he continued, once again back in control. However, all she told me was that something was eating at her brain and that she was seeing crows everywhere she went. Her parents asked us not to say anything to anyone, only that they moved. Calvin, I am so sorry. The burden you had to carry all this time, not being able to tell the truth. Cynthia wished she could do more for Calvin than just to give him apologies. Cynthia didn't think she had anything to do with Ellie's situation back then, but she couldn't rule it out completely. Ellie was one of the people that had disappeared years ago during the game with the ghost. Calvin said, on the other hand, she was certain that her disappearance had to do with her returning. It had to. For the next couple of hours, the two old schoolmates went door to door looking for answers. All they received was a bunch of apologies and promises. It wasn't until almost dusk when Cynthia and Calvin parted ways for the evening. Bobby stared at the beam of moonlight that stretched across the ceiling. He was exhausted, but his eyelids would not let him sleep. It was as if they had a mind of their own and were set on torturing him for what he had done. The sound of Brad's voice echoed in his mind, saying that the witch stories were true. Bobby had believed all that gibberish was just a bunch of hocus pocus. But, after seeing the chess pieces flying in the air, his doubts were squashed. Witches are real. What was truly terrifying about that was one of the witches was living next door, and now had it out for him. Bobby could just imagine Mr. Wilburn was next door right now, standing over a massive black cauldron, pouring different colored potions into it for his next evil spell. A spell most likely being prepared for Bobby's demise. The same one Mr. Wilburn probably used on Brad. Bobby's pulse began to race as a thought shot through his brain. The spellbook. There might be a spell that will locate Brad. Jumping out of bed, he went to the bottom drawer of the dresser where he had hidden the book under a bunch of clothes. Grabbing the flashlight, he rushed back to bed, pulling the blankets over him to shield the light. Again, Bobby was careful not to touch the symbol on the front cover as he opened the door, then began looking for a spell that would find his friend. Cynthia tossed and turned as she tried to find a comfortable spot. She was careful in her movements so as not to wake David. Not that it would matter. David had the talent of sleeping through an earthquake. As hard as she tried, Cynthia could not get her muscles to relax enough for sleep to take hold. Giving up the battle, she had no chance of winning. She decided to make a cup of chamomile tea. Closing the door gently behind her, Cynthia started down the hallway to the kitchen. Her feet stopped under the rope that had opened the way to the attic. Before she could stop herself, she pulled it. The aluminum ladder came down, begging her to climb them once again. Beads of sweat covered her body, followed by goosebumps. Every instinct inside her begged her to run, to grab her family and leave, never to return to this horrible place again. Cynthia began to climb the ladder. Chapter 7. The Attic. Cynthia looked at the two attic walls, leaning from the ground at 45-degree angles, only to meet one another at the highest point. The dim light once again revealed a scene that she had fought so hard to forget. Her breathing became ragged as she gazed upon the many boxes in the corner, boxes that were labeled as Grandpa's, filled with all his greatest possessions. Is that all we become in the end? Items that are too important and sentimental to be thrown away. So they are carefully wrapped and intricately placed, like a game of Tetris, into boxes and hidden from sight, like Quasimodo chained in the bell tower, until the next generation finds several boxes of garbage, useless and irrelevant items that they either haul to the secondhand store or simply toss into the rubbish bin. Just a bunch of useless junk in a box. Is that all our lives are really worth? The only evidence that we ever even existed boiled down to nothing. Cynthia attempted to hold back the screams that fought to be let loose, screams that had been suppressed all these years. Instead of a loud outburst of pent-up rage, despair, and fear, a sigh of resignation escaped her parched lips. Resignation that she once again going to be forced to play a game of life and death. Working systematically, Cynthia moved boxes out of the way so she could get to the one box she had hidden the chessboard in. She felt no emotion as she broke her promise that she would never touch the board again. Emotions would only get in her way, and too much was at stake. It took no time for her to have the game set to play on the same box she had used as a table years before. "You don't get to sit this time," Cynthia said as she kicked the one chair away from the table. She had put it there last time for what she had thought was her grandfather's ghost. "Not this time. You can stand." In the last game, Cynthia's opponent moved first, even though it was playing black. In chess, white always went first. This time, she was not about to let it have the satisfaction of manipulating her. Grabbing the white pawn in front of her king, she moved it 2 spaces forward. "Your move." Bobby bit down hard on his lower lip to stifle a scream as pain shot through his hand, then all the way up to his arm. He looked at his thumb through tear-filled eyes to see it bleeding once again. Bobby had been reading the spell book when he heard the words "your move" in his head. That's when the pain shot through him. He swallowed hard, tasting blood from his lower lip. Did I accidentally activate one of the spells? No. I was careful not to read any of them fully. Then what? As he questioned this, the mental image of the chessboard came into view. Bobby's eyes shot wide as he understood. It had to be responsible for it. He just couldn't figure out how. Not to mention, what does "your move" mean? Is the board possessed? Your move? Does it mean it's my move? Bobby didn't get a chance to rationalize it. Drops of his blood fell into the page of the spellbook where it quickly absorbed. It was as if the book was a vampire eagerly drinking every drop, attempting to quench an unquenchable thirst. He was about to push the book away when the pages started flipping rapidly. Suddenly, they stopped. Bobby sucked in a deep breath as he saw what was written on the page it landed on. It was a location spell. The dim light coming from the single light bulb flickered to a rhythm like Morse code, as if even the light source knew that there was something horrible about to happen in the attic and was signaling for help. Yet nothing. All was still. After Cynthia had descended the ladder to initiate her opponent's move, she turned around and again began climbing the rungs. Even being caffeinated, she had less energy and was slower than last time she played. At 7, her vitality was endless. She could have sold the excess energy that overflowed from her small body. That would be nice, she thought. She felt her knees and wasn't looking forward to the repetitive process of going up and down the steep ladder. Walking back to the board and sitting down, she noticed nothing had been moved. "Come on, it's your move." She waited, confused. She sat for what felt like hours, waiting for any of the black pieces to move. Did she need to go down the ladder again? Was she starting to think maybe she had been wrong, that Brad's disappearance had nothing to do with her and the game? Now, for the first time, Cynthia was thinking that she was reading more into things because of the trauma of her past. Or maybe that quiet feeling in the back of her mind, hidden away like her grandfather's packing boxes, was correct, that none of this was real. It was just her imagination of an eccentric 7-year-old. She again suppressed the thought, unable to accept the fact that her fears may be irrational and self-initiated. As she was about to get up and leave, the black pawn in front of the king absorbed the light, before it moved 2 spaces forward. Cynthia's breathing came in gasps as emotions ran rampant through her. At first, there was relief that the movement of the pawn assured her that she had been right all along. However, it was replaced by dread as she once again began a strategic game of death. The only thing that gave her any amount of comfort was that she wouldn't have to keep running up and down that stupid ladder. It was quickly apparent to Cynthia that she was not playing the same spirit as the first time. Whoever was controlling the pieces now moved with precise strategy. Of course, it didn't matter who it was, only that the stakes were the same. Cynthia was surprised at how well she was playing, though. She was afraid being rusty would cause a quick loss. However, all her grandfather's lessons came flooding back in, allowing her to come up with her own strategies. It was over an hour before the first piece was taken. She moved her white piece to what she had often referred to as the morgue. Cynthia could almost feel her opponent laughing at her. "Cynthia, what are you doing up here?" Cynthia, hearing her name, jumped in her seat, almost knocking over the chessboard and all of its pieces. Fear gripped her heart at the thought of what would happen if she knocked it over. She had never questioned that as a possibility before, and didn't want to find out. Turning, she saw David standing by the ladder. "Ah, you couldn't resist getting your grandfather's old chessboard out to play. All right, I will play, Black. But take it easy on me," he joked as he grabbed the fallen chair. "No!" Cynthia screamed, coming out of her seat, blocking him from getting near the board. Okay, David replied, holding his hands up. "Sorry." No, I'm sorry, she quickly apologized. It's just being back here. Hey, hey, it's okay, he whispered, pulling her into his embrace. I understand. Everything will be fine. It just takes time. That's just it. You don't understand. How could you? Cynthia's body shuddered, causing David to hold her tighter while kissing her lightly on her head. It will never be fine until I'm dead and this curse is broken. Here, I might have something to cheer you up, David offered, letting her go to grab something out of his back pocket. I found it yesterday and meant to give it to you then. But with the whole Calvin thing, I forgot. Funny, I don't remember there being a red X over the boy's head when I found it. The blood in Cynthia's veins turned to ice, causing her to freeze as she stared at the picture David gave her. It was her 7th grade class photo. The young boy David was talking about, with the X through it, was Calvin. My pawn! She glanced over at it lying on his side in the morgue. Calvin was taken from her again. Cynthia, David called as she pushed past him to hurry down the ladder. It took all of Cynthia's control to get her hands to stop shaking enough to make the phone call. Hi, Margaret, is Calvin there? Cynthia prayed he was, but when she heard Margaret crying, her heart sank. Cynthia, what's going on? Talk to me. David had heard part of the conversation on the phone, something about Calvin missing, and police were now searching for both him and Brad. I can't right now. I have to. Have to what? David stopped her before she could rush by him this time. He was trying his best to understand what was going on, but her erratic behavior ever since he showed her the picture had him more than just a little worried. David knew there was something seriously wrong with his wife and was determined to get to the bottom of it. I promise I will tell you, but for now, I need you to promise me something in return. Cynthia held his face, forcing him to keep eye contact with her. I need you to stay here to keep an eye on Mom and Bobby. Don't let them out of your sight for anything. But, he began to object. For anything, she demanded. David nodded, letting it go. So much for getting to the bottom of it. David watched her walk away, wondering, when did he start losing battles with everyone? If this kept up, he would have to retire from being a lawyer. Where are you going? He couldn't help but to at least ask. Cynthia staggered a little as the words, your move, thundered in her skull. To the attic. Cynthia grabbed a family photo, one with her parents, David, and Bobby in it as she headed up to the attic. Making sure to pull the ladder up behind her, Cynthia ran a broom through the latch to prevent it from being opened from below. Setting the picture down next to her class photo, she sat down and began examining the board for her next move. Chapter 8. New Plan. Bobby watched nervously from the bushes. He tried to look everywhere at once, expecting to be caught by either his parents or Tyler's. Bobby had told his father that he wasn't feeling well when his father asked him what he had wanted for breakfast. It was the only way Bobby could sneak out of the house since his parents wouldn't let him go out after hearing about Brad's disappearance. Now he is sitting in the bushes, waiting for Tyler to sneak out of his house, since he had also been forbidden to leave. The whole town was apparently on lockdown. Bobby's stomach made a loud growling sound that startled him. Maybe I should have told Dad to give me something for breakfast after all. Yet he knew it wouldn't have mattered if he had eaten. The way his stomach felt right now, he was afraid he would just throw it back up. Finally, Bobby breathed, as Tyler finally joined him. Did he get a hold of Mark? Is he bringing the stuff? Yeah, apparently he knows a guy that could get the ingredients. He's going to meet us at the park, Tyler replied. Of course Mark knew a guy. Lucky for Bobby, this was one time he was happy he was Mark's acquaintance. Both boys immediately took off towards the park, being sure to not walk in the open at risk of being spotted. About an hour later, the 3 boys were hiding out in a dried-up ravine that was just behind the park. It provided perfect shelter from prying eyes. Bobby was off to the side, making a potion from the ingredients Mark had brought. A little distance away, Mark and Tyler were off to the side, making small talk. Did you have a hard time sneaking out of your house? Tyler asked. Sneaking out? Why would I need to sneak out? My parents tell me to go outside as soon as I wake up every morning. They say I need as much vitamin D as possible. Sometimes when I come home at night, they almost seem surprised to see me. They are strange that way, Mark replied, taking another drag of his cigarette before blowing smoke rings in the air. Tyler did his best to hide his expression at Mark's parents' peculiar parenting style. Not wanting to get punched in the face, Tyler decided he should deviate from the whole family life topic. I still think we should go to the police. If Mr. Wilburn has Brad, they can get him back. And tell them what exactly? Bobby asked as he approached them. He had finished the potion and just needed to let it set for a few minutes. Hello, officers. We have been having a doozy of a time lately. We smashed an old man's window, twice. Then we broke and entered his home, where Mark drank all of his beer in addition to eating what we think were leftovers, which is, by the way, disgusting. Finally, we stole a book containing magical spells. Oh, let's also not forget, we also think Mr. Wilburn's a witch and is holding our friend hostage. And that is why you're a dumbass one, Mark laughed as he punched Tyler in the arm. Come on, the potion's ready, Bobby stated as he gave Tyler a gentle pat on the back in the form of an apology. He knew Tyler was in this mess because of him and didn't have to be here right now. That kind of loyalty shouldn't be treated poorly. Boys gathered around the makeshift cauldron, which was nothing more than a large pot from Mark's house. Bobby didn't know if he needed a real cauldron, but since there wasn't time to get one, and even if there was, he didn't know where he could find such a thing, therefore the pot would have to do. Pulling the spellbook out of his backpack, he opened the page of the location spell. Tyler handed him Brad's baseball cap. They needed something of Brad's for the final touch of the spell. Nth, Tonath, Rever, Nobad, Kampok, Bobby began. He had no idea if he was saying the words correctly. He only hoped that they were, for Brad's sake. Bobby repeated the phrase 6 times as the book instructed. The boys watched with intensity as the last words left Bobby's lips. Each of them expected something different to happen. Mark was hoping for it to explode into a giant ball of fire, not realizing if it did, they all would most likely die. Tyler, on the other hand, feared a massive black dragon would appear out of the dark green smoke, ready to blast them all with its hellfire before devouring them. Bobby was the only one that didn't believe anything would happen. The thought of pulling off a magic spell without any formal training was nothing more than a wishful dream. When nothing happened, he was both relieved and sad. All 3 boys were blown backward several feet before landing hard on the ground. Mark was the first to recover, jumping back to his feet. He raised both arms high in the air. He then began conducting worshipping hand signals with a playful yet creepy smile. Tyler groaned as he sat up, touching his face gently. He pulled his hands away as he felt the heat on his skin. As the smoke cleared, they saw Bobby staggering his way over to them. His clothing was covered in burn marks, and his hair was standing straight out as if it had touched one of those electricity balls. "Oh my God, look, Tyler!" Mark screamed in laughter while pointing at Tyler's face. "What? Oh God, what?" Tyler cried, panicking. His hands searched his body rapidly, fearing the worst. He didn't know if he had lost a vital body part, or if he had just been transformed into something hideous. "Do I have a towel?" As Tyler ran in circles, looking behind him for a towel, Mark fell to the ground, holding his stomach. His belly began to hurt from laughing so hard. "Enough," Bobby scolded Mark, before turning his attention to Tyler. "You're all right. Your face is just really red, and your hair is standing out just like the rest of us. As for you, Mark, you might want to check those eyebrows there, or lack thereof." Mark's laughter immediately stopped as he felt for his eyebrows. They were completely gone. Now it was Tyler's turn to laugh, at least until Bobby shot him a look. Satisfied he had them under control, Bobby unsteadily made his way back to the pot to see what happened. There was black-looking paste or resin at the bottom. Using a stick, he stirred it, making sure to get enough on the tip before smearing it onto Brad's hat. There was a bright flash of yellow that caused Bobby to temporarily shield his eyes. When he looked back to the hat, it had turned entirely gold in color. Fighting against his better instincts to not touch a possibly highly dangerous magical object, Bobby picked the hat up off the ground. A warm tingle crawled up his arm, but he didn't panic. Somehow it felt comforting to him, like it was there to help. Before he knew it, Bobby put the hat on. Immediately his eyes went from one of normal vision to one of seeing a gold line leading off into the distance, almost like a compass. Great. What am I supposed to do now? Follow the yellow brick road? Looking at Mark and Tyler, he couldn't think of a more fitting analogy. After all, his companions were the cowardly lion and brainless scarecrow. He grew a smile the more he visualized it. Cynthia watched helplessly as the Black Knight knocked over another one of her pawns. She picked up the fallen soldier to place it in the morgue with the others. Tears filled her eyes as she watched a red X form over Tapper's head. Tapper and Bella had been her best friends. Now she was putting them both in danger once again. They both had X's on them, along with a few others. Cynthia fought to control her breathing as a feeling of helplessness washed over her. She was losing. The chessboard vibrated as if it were laughing at her, taunting her with her own incompetence. Cynthia clenched her fists as anger filled her, replacing all other emotions. At that moment, she almost threw the board across the room, not caring what the consequences would be, only wanting it to be over, even if it meant her death. The book! Cynthia remembered the book that had appeared the last time she was losing, the one where her grandparents had left a written message in it. The advice they had written, along with the strategy of the contents, gave her the edge she needed to achieve victory. Would they be enough this time? Cynthia didn't know, especially since her new opponent seemed to be way more experienced. A glance at the picture with all the X's on it told her that she at least had to try. "Great, you led us back to your house," Mark complained as the boys hid in the same bushes as last time. "Maybe it isn't a location spell. Maybe it's a safety spell, like it's telling us to stay home," Tyler said hopefully. "It didn't lead us home. It's leading us there." Bobby pointed to Mr. Wilburn's house. The gold line pointed directly to the front door. "Not again," Tyler whined. "Yes, again. Brad is definitely in there," Bobby assured. He looked at Tyler for a moment. He could see the boy was terrified by his constant fidgeting. Hell, we are all terrified. Still, he couldn't ask Tyler to go into the house. Bobby glanced at Mark and, seeing the stupid, giddy look at the older boy's face, knew he wouldn't be going in alone. Bobby didn't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing. What Bobby did know was he needed a plan, a real one this time, if they had any chance of rescuing Brad. A burst of adrenaline shot through Cynthia's veins as she took out another black pawn. It was the third one. A smile found its way to her lips as she saw the last X disappear from the picture. She liked being at a nominal position, tied. Her friends were safe again, at least for now anyway. Cynthia rubbed her grandfather's book as if rubbing a good luck charm. You saved me once before, now it looks like you're going to save me again. Your move. Cynthia winced as the words thundered in her head. Are we getting angry? Not so easy when you're not playing a 7-year-old. Looking back at the board with a renewed confidence, Cynthia saw that the black rook had been moved halfway up the board. It was positioned to take out her bishop. Without hesitation, she moved her bishop diagonally 3 spaces. This made sure her piece wouldn't be taken by the rook, while setting her pawn up to take another pawn on the next move. Cynthia sat back in her chair and shot a deadly stare across the table to where she imagined her opponent's face was. How she wished she could see the look on its face at that moment. The black knight seemed to shine brighter as it moved up 2, over 1, knocking the white queen over. No! Cynthia came forward in her chair. A lump formed in her throat, preventing her cries from escaping further. In her exuberance at winning a few measly victories, she did not see the trap that had been set. Cynthia sucked in a deep breath as she watched an X form over her mother. Not again. Your move. Chapter 9. Next move. Bobby had sent Tyler and Mark on a mission. Their job was to scout out different angles of Mr. Wilburn's house. Bobby wanted to know how many windows and entrances there were, and also where each one was located. He had sent them away to give him time to come up with his next move. Good news, Tyler announced as he and Mark rejoined Bobby. Mark got close enough to the garage to look in one of the windows. He says Mr. Wilburn's car wasn't even there. That means Mr. Wilburn isn't home, Bobby reasoned. This was indeed good news. Wait, does that mean that he might have Brad with him? Maybe he took Brad to another place to torture him. Mark's eyes went wide as his own words played the horrific scene out in his head. No, Brad's in the house, Bobby assured. The hat was still showing Mr. Wilburn's home as a final destination. Bobby had Tyler draw Mr. Wilburn's house in the dirt. Then Mark and Tyler added X's to indicate where all the windows were, along with O's to indicate where all the entrances were. It was the ultimate game of tic-tac-toe. After all was said and done, Bobby had his plan. Mark would enter the window on the west that led to the basement to start his investigation. Bobby would go in from the front entrance and head straight to the upper floor to search the rooms. He believed if Brad really was there, he would most likely be held in the altar room. Tyler was told to stand watch outside for any sign of Mr. Wilburn coming home. This assignment obviously pleased Tyler, for he let out a sigh of relief. Also, since they didn't have radios this time, Tyler was instructed to throw rocks at the window above the garage. Okay, this is the plan. Remember, any sign of Mr. Wilburn, get the hell out as fast as you can and meet back here. Also, remember if one of us finds Brad, the call-out is Red Robin 3 times. Understand? Bobby asked. After everyone agreed, Bobby and Mark headed across the street. Once they hit the driveway, the boys parted ways. Mark was the first to reach the entry point. Taking off his jean jacket, he placed it over some of the remaining broken glass he had kicked in previously. Mark went in, feet first, praying that there was nothing deadly to fall on below him. Once he landed safely, he surveyed the basement. There was still enough sunlight coming from the other 2 windows to give him a general view of everything. For the most part, the basement was filled with the typical stuff one might find in most people's homes: old furniture, fixtures, collectibles, and of course, creepy-ass dolls. Freaking hate dolls, he muttered, as he saw 2 on a nearby shelf. They stared at him with their glassy eyes. One of the dolls was badly damaged, as if it were in a fire. A chill ran down Mark's spine, followed by the strong sense of dread. Before he could stop himself, he vomited. Bobby was careful where he stepped, not wanting to make any noise, as he once again climbed the steps of the back porch. He was afraid that Mr. Wilburn would have locked the back door after they had broken in, but when Bobby turned the knob, it opened easily. Of course. What would the son of Satan be scared of? Entering the kitchen during the day was completely different from entering at night. Bobby could see everything more clearly, something he regretted as he looked upon the kitchen. Dirty plates were stacked all over the place. Now I know why my mom and dad are always on my case to clean up after myself. The kitchen sink was filled with what looked like a thick, dark, reddish liquid. It was definitely where the smell was coming from. Quickly covering his nose and mouth, Bobby left the kitchen as fast as possible. Despite his stomach being empty from the lack of food, he didn't want to take the chance that something still might come up. Dust particles could be seen floating in the beams of sunlight that filled the hallway. The effect was like watching a snow scene inside a decaying house. Bobby didn't stop this time to check out the pictures on the walls. He was on a mission and headed for the stairs. What? He breathed. The hat showed a path to the front door, not upstairs. Confused, Bobby made his way to a window near the entrance. Looking outside, the gold path stopped on the front steps, but there was nothing there. Definitely no signs of Brad. Just some disturbing-looking garden gnome. Maybe that hat was just indicating the porch because that was the way a normal person would enter. Whatever the hat was trying to tell him didn't matter right now. He was running out of time. All that mattered was that Brad was somewhere in the house. He could feel it. Tyler looked around. All was quiet. Maybe too quiet. He couldn't explain it. But he felt something was very wrong. He chalked it up to him just being scared. Fear was just part of being a coward. That was the way he thought about it. Tyler hated the way he was. Just for once he wanted to be the brave hero that saves the damsel in distress, not the person that runs away with his tail between his legs. That was going to end today, Tyler decided. Storming across the street, he was determined to help search the house for Brad instead of sitting on the sidelines. Tyler stopped in his tracks halfway across the street. Something out of the corner of his eye caught his attention. Changing directions, he went to investigate. Tears streamed down Cynthia's face, falling into her lap. An X appeared above David's head as she lost her rook. He was the latest victim to join the morgue. Now there were X's over half the children in her 7th grade picture, along with the ones over her mother and David. She was losing badly. The only 2 strong pieces she had left on the board was a bishop and a knight. Her opponent still had 2 rooks and its queen. There was no way she could win. Despair sat heavy on her heart, slowly crushing the life from it. This is how it ends, she cried. Bobby wiped the beads of sweat off his forehead as he reached the top of the stairs without making a sound. Tiptoeing, he made his way to the altar room. The door was slightly ajar, allowing the candlelight from within to shine through. Bobby cautiously crept to the crack and peeked in. His blood ran cold as he became paralyzed. He's here. Mr. Wilburn sat at the table in front of the chessboard. An evil grin was spread across his face as he gazed upon the pieces. His face was made even more sinister by all the lit candles casting their shadowy dance across the room. Dear Sid, are you finally realizing you have lost? The old man's voice startled Bobby, but luckily he was too scared to scream. All those years ago you stole my wife's very essence, but now I will soon have her back fully and in a new body once your king falls. Your move. Bobby's thumb began to throb, causing him to wince in pain. He had been right. It was hurting because of the chessboard. Somehow my blood has bound me to it. But what exactly does that mean? Bobby also wondered if Mr. Wilburn was talking to his mother. Was she playing the white pieces somehow? Grandpa's chessboard? In the attic? Pieces were starting to fit together. Mark picked up the crossbow that looked like something out of medieval times. Eagerly he cocked it and fitted an arrow. Going into battle mode, he crouched down and ran from shadow to shadow, pretending he was picking off imaginary enemies that surrounded him. Stepping on something, he fell backward into a large wooden cabinet that almost looked like a coffin of sorts. A feeling of excitement filled his entire body as he gazed upon it lovingly. Please, let there be a dead body. Please let there be a dead body. Mark tried to open it one-handed while holding the crossbow at the ready. The top was stuck, forcing him to put the crossbow down so he could use both hands. His face turned red as he strained to lift the lid. There came cracking noises as the wood began to splinter in areas. Mark found himself flying backwards into a support beam. Dust filled his eyes, nose, and mouth, causing him to choke. Finally, when he could see and breathe again, Mark saw that the lid now sat half open. He approached slowly, not so eager to see what was inside now. Using a nearby object, he pushed the lid off all the way. It fell to the ground with a loud crash, while splintering into more pieces. At first, nothing happened. Then the largest 2-headed snake rose up before Mark. 4 eyes stared directly at him, while its 2 tongues flickered hungrily. Mark screamed as the 2-headed snake struck. A vehicle down the street caught Tyler's attention. His eyes went wide as he recognized the car. It was Mr. Wilburn's. What is he doing here? Oh God, that means he's home. I have to warn Bobby. Tyler took off on a run towards the house. There came several paws from behind him. He gave a quick glance over his shoulder, only to see 4 large black crows coming after him. Adrenaline pumped through him, aiding his legs, increasing their speed. Tyler couldn't remember a time when he had ran so fast. His PE coach would be proud. Of course, he had never been this terrified before, either. Maybe the coach should start hiring pros for practice. Tyler wanted to run home, where he would have been safe, but that was something a coward would do. This time he decided that he wouldn't leave Bobby to get killed. Mark, maybe, but not Bobby. Not this time. Now was the time for a hero. Tyler made his hands into fists and held them out in front of him as if he were flying. The crow's caused screech in his ears as he made his way to Mr. Wilburn's front steps. just before he was hit from behind. His momentum carried him forward, forcing him to land hard on the ground. Tyler felt something break under his weight. At first, he thought it might have been one of his ribs, but when he rolled over and looked at the ground, he saw that it was broken pieces of a garden gnome. Tyler's eyes almost fell out of their sockets when he saw all of the blood that spilled out of the broken gnome. Why was it filled with blood? Pain exploded in Bobby's head, causing him to scream out loud. It was the hat. Something was wrong with it. Ripping it off his head, Bobby threw it to the ground, where it burst into flames. Boom! Bobby felt the wind get knocked out of him as his feet left the ground. Then everything went dark. Cynthia's head erupted with a sharp pain, blinding her. When her vision cleared, she found herself sitting in the park once again. A chessboard was laid out in front of her, set up the same way as it had been in the attic. Across from her sat her grandfather. He was dressed in one of his casual suits, neatly pressed just the way he preferred. "Grandpa?" Cynthia breathed. At first he didn't respond, just sat there looking at the game with a pensive expression. "Hey, Tiger, looks like you're in one heck of a pickle again," he said, finally breaking the silence. "Grandpa, why is this happening to me?" Cynthia wanted to run and hug him, but was too scared that if she moved, he would vanish. Right now she needed answers more than a warm embrace. "Why indeed," he mused. "You are here because your grandfather is a fool. Your grandmother knew from the start that the Wilburns were no good, warned me all the way up until she died." Her grandfather stared off in the distance, lost in thought. Cynthia dared to reach out and touch his hand. The gesture brought her grandfather back, and he smiled warningly at her. "You have her eyes, you know." He touched her face gently. "Grandpa, why am I here?" she asked softly. "You are here because the Wilburns were stealing people's life essence to stay young." He looked back down at the board. "You see, the chessboard is magicked. A spell had been placed on it so that every time a piece was lost, it stole part of the person's life essence and put it into the owner of the board, thus giving the owner a sort of immortality, if you will." Cynthia remembered the story of Calvin had told her about Mrs. Wilburn's son telling him and Ellie to get off the property. It wasn't her son, it was Mr. Wilburn. He was younger because he was at the park every Saturday, stealing people's life energy, their youth. Cynthia couldn't believe if any of this was real. How could it be? Witches don't exist. Yet, here she was sitting in the limbo, talking with her dead grandfather. "I don't understand. If they were stealing people's, whatever, how do I factor into this?" None of this made any sense to her. If an old bogey like me dies, people would just assume it was just old age that killed me. It wouldn't draw any attention, and the younger generation really didn't play chess anymore. Not if they didn't want an atomic wedgie every day. He couldn't help but laugh at that. Then he looked at Cynthia soberly. "You, on the other hand, were an exception. So very talented, even back then. You had the potential to be great." Cynthia couldn't help but smile the compliment. She knew that the only reason she loved chess was because he was the one that had taught her how to play. And one day, Jack Wilburn brought the board to the park, knowing I would do anything for it. His brows furrowed as he grimaced in anger. My eagerness to have it, combined with my ego, ended up costing me everything that day. It wasn't until after that bastard had murdered me that I found out what he had done. Cynthia gasped at the revelation. Mr. Wilburn had murdered her grandfather. That was when I found out that his wife had some kind of sickness inside her, and that even magic could not fix. It was probably internal rot that had spread from her black heart. One can only cheat death so much before he finally gets you in the end. Her grandfather shook his head at the thought. That explains the spots on Mrs. Wilburn's skin that Calvin and Ellie had seen that night. She was dying. The pieces were starting to come together. Anyway, Jack needed more than old folks' life essence to save her. He needed a new vessel. "Me," Cynthia's stomach twisted inside, causing her to shake uncontrollably. "Yes, you," he replied sadly. They needed someone both young enough and someone they could trick into playing the game. Jack knew how strong our bond had grown over chess and knew you would play it after I was dead. So Jack had put a spell on this board, linking it to a twin in his house. That first time you played in the attic wasn't with me, or with him. You were playing against his wife. She had to beat you to get your body. But if it was just me that she needed, why did all my friends disappear each time I lost a piece? Cynthia asked, still confused. It wasn't a matter of just taking your body. She still needed your friend's life essence to make the transition successful, and at the same time used it as a tool to force you to keep playing. Cynthia sat back, taking it all in. Then she sat straight up. "I beat her. What does that mean?" "It means that you carry a small part of her inside of you." He took her hands once again in his. "It means that as long as there is some small essence alive inside of you, she can be brought back." "So I am playing Mr. Wilburn this time?" she rhetorically asked. Is going to use me to bring her back?" Cynthia wanted to scream at the absurdity, the craziness of all of it. How is this real? This is ridiculous. I have to be dreaming. Sid, there's one more thing. You are only the means this time. The vessel has changed. His voice became distant sounding as he slowly became translucent. Cynthia grasped desperately at his hands, but they slipped through hers as they faded away. Grandpa, don't leave me. Who is the vessel? The blood of my blood, came the response as his cloud-like form began to float away from her. Cynthia's heart jumped into her throat as she realized the answer. Bobby. Grandpa, I need you, please, she begged. I can't beat him. Yes, you can. A great chess player doesn't win because of one move. They win by playing the next move before the first. Then he was gone. Cynthia closed her eyes while taking slow, deep breaths. When she opened them again, she found herself back in the attic. Looking at the board, she analyzed all the pieces left. Then she heard her grandfather's voice one last time. Next move. Chapter 10. Game On. Mark dove to the side at the last second, barely avoiding being bitten in the face by razor-sharp fangs. Fear drove him towards the window he came in. Leaping over obstacles, throwing all caution to the wind, it was a miracle he didn't stumble and fall even once. Mark smiled with glee as the window ledge was now within jumping distance. Just as he was about to leap for his life, the two-headed snake rose up before him, blocking in his shot for freedom. Mark began backpedaling, grabbing anything and everything around him, chucking random objects at the slithering foe. It was no use. His adversary was way too fast. The snake zigzagged repeatedly, easily, avoiding the missile sent its way. Mark could have sworn he heard the beast laughing at him, taunting him. His heel hit something, this time causing him to fall backwards. Ugh! Mark grunted. He was dazed, but still coherent enough to see the snake slithering towards his feet, before rising up to stare down at him. What do you want? Mark quickly realized he wasn't going to get an answer. He was never going to get anything ever again. Both heads of the snake sank their fangs deep into each of his thighs, pumping their venom directly into his veins. Mark could instantly feel it burning as the poison traveled through his internal rivers of blood. Sweat drenched his body while his vision blurred. Mark used what little strength he had left to feel for anything that was close enough for him to use as a weapon. He knew he was a dead man, but hoped to get at least one final shot in before the end. Both heads released their hold at the same time, before rising up once more. The four red eyes gazed upon Mark, almost daring him to do something. They watched as he then smiled. Bye, Mark raised the crossbow, pulling the trigger. The arrow drove halfway through the snake, right under where the two heads split apart. The momentum of the shot carried the four-eyed demon across the basement where the arrow tip was finally embedded into the wall. A brief feeling of satisfaction came over Mark as he watched the life leave the creature. He followed their lead, and everything seemed to close in around him before going dark. Tyler spun around in circles with his arms flailing in an attempt to ward off the preying birds. It became quickly apparent that his attempts were futile. Blood poured from several places along his head and body as beaks and claws tore at his exposed flesh. He screamed as his tears mixed with blood while being eaten alive. Tyler thought of running home, but knew that he would never make it to safety. Instead, he fought his way to Mr. Wilburn's front door. I won't run this time, Bobby. I'm not a coward today. I'm a hero. Get off me, you evil spawns, Tyler screamed. The handle over the door kept slipping through his blood-soaked hand. Tyler closed his eyes. He could no longer see anyway. He focused on his breathing, slowing it down, regaining control. As the fear left his body, he calmly secured a perch and opened the door. A crow landed on his shoulder and took his ear. Hey, Eugenia. A crow landed on his shoulder and took his ear. Tyler's hand shot up, catching the vile thing as it took flight. He gripped hard in both hands until he felt its bones break and went limp. The corners of his lips lifted before the ground rushed up to meet him. Bobby's eyelids felt extremely heavy as they slowly opened. At first, all he saw was a light blur, with the dark blur in the center. As his vision cleared, he saw Mr. Wilburn sitting directly across from him, focused on the chessboard. It took all his willpower not to say anything, or even move. The old man's attention was occupied, and he sure didn't want to do anything that changed that. Glancing down as much as he dared, Bobby saw that he was tied securely to the chair. Slowly, he tried moving his hands, but they were bound tight. No use trying to escape, Mr. Wilburn said without taking his eyes off the board. Let me go, Bobby demanded bravely. Or I will. Or you'll what? Mr. Wilburn came off his chair, putting his face only inches from Bobby's. Your father belongs to me, along with your grandmother. And soon, so shall your mother. Bobby turned his head to the side while trying to hold his breath. The smell of Mr. Wilburn was triggering his gag reflex, making him want to vomit. Good, maybe I should puke on this old man. That would teach him. Before he could act upon that urge, Mr. Wilburn calmly sat back down, resuming his study of the game. The old man's gnarled fingers picked up his rook and moved it up 4 spots. This put him in position to take the white bishop. Smiling, the old man sat back and said, "Your move." A confused expression came over Bobby's face. Is he saying it's my turn? How am I supposed to play strapped to a chair? As the white knight floated in the air, Bobby got his answer. The piece moved up 2 and over 1, knocking over the black queen. "So, it still looks like you still have a little fight left in you after all, Sid," Mr. Wilburn spat at the board. Bobby's eyes went wide at the mention of his mother's name. Somehow, he was playing mom. Bobby didn't know exactly what was going on, even though he had suspicion since the first time he had heard "your move" in his head. One thing Bobby was definitely sure of was that his blood, being absorbed by the chessboard, had something to do with all of it. "It makes little difference, Sid. I have you now," Mr. Wilburn taunted as he picked up the rook and took out the white bishop. One more move, and he would have the white king trapped. Mr. Wilburn's hand trembled as he reveled in what he assumed was a sure victory. "Your move." The white knight moved again, but not where the old man had anticipated. He was sure Cynthia would move it in a different position in a feeble attempt to protect her king. Instead, the white knight moved 2 back and 1 over, taking out one of his rooks while putting the black king in check. "Impossible!" The old man screamed as he came to his feet, his tall frame towering over both the chessboard and Bobby. But then Mr. Wilburn realized what Cynthia had done. She had calculated her next move several plays ahead, something only a professional would do. His assumption of her lack of skill was misplaced, and now he is going to lose. There was no move Mr. Wilburn could make to get out of her trap. Now, not only was he going to lose the chance to bring his wife back, but he was now going to join her in the grave. Fear ran through Bobby as Mr. Wilburn began to convulse in rage. Candlelight shadows flickering across the old man's tormented visage made the scene that much more terrifying. Then, before Bobby could stop himself, he started giggling uncontrollably. "You think this is funny?" Mr. Wilburn screamed, showering Bobby's face with spittle. "First, ew on the whole spit thing," Bobby replied, as the foul-smelling saliva ran down his face. "Second, you getting beat by my mom, who hasn't played since she was younger than me. Yeah, I would say that was a little—" Bobby felt his face explode in pain as the man's hand slapped him hard across the face. The blow came so fast that Bobby didn't even see it coming. The stinging pain radiating from his cheek assured him that he had indeed been struck. "Come on, come on! Come on, I have you!" Cynthia screamed in anticipation. She had to calm herself mentally as she set the trap. There could be no mistakes. Following her grandfather's advice, Cynthia had allowed the game to play out several times in her head before physically touching any of the pieces on the board. She had played every next move scenario until finally there was only one option left that guaranteed victory. Cynthia's legs bounced rapidly like a jackhammer, eagerly devouring the concrete to get to the sweetness beneath. She bit her nails, causing one of them to bleed. Why isn't he making his move? He has to see that he has lost. Is he not going to end the game, just to prolong the agony? The anticipation became more than she could bear. Shooting to her feet, she screamed at the emptiness on the other side of the board. "Your move!" Bobby struggled to stay conscious as the blows rained down upon him. His eyes were almost swollen shut, and he could taste his blood running down the back of his throat. Bobby didn't care, though, because he believed that Mark or Tyler would come to save him before this lunatic killed him. "You don't really believe that, do you? Mark is probably in the kitchen right now, drinking more booze and eating whatever was left in the refrigerator. As for Tyler, he's already back at his house curled up under his blankets." "Your friends aren't coming to save you," Mr. Wilburn said, as if he had read Bobby's mind. "2 of them are dying as we speak. As for the third, well, let's just say I was hoping to keep him for a while as a lawn decoration. Unfortunately, he had an unpleasant accident, as in, he's no longer with us." Bobby felt as if he had been punched in the gut. A knot formed in his stomach, causing agonizing pain. He wondered if it was possible to form an instinct ulcer at his age. Good, I deserve it. Everyone is going to die, and it's my fault. They were only trying to help me get my soccer ball back. Now they're going to pay the ultimate price. Tears rolled off Bobby's stinging cheeks, but he didn't care. He no longer cared about anything. Staring directly at the old man's withered face, Bobby gave him the bravest look he could muster. "My mom will make you pay for this." "You little shit!" Mr. Wilburn balled his fist and struck Bobby directly in the face. It was as if everything went in slow motion for Bobby. He felt his entire face explode in unbearable pain. His vision was blinded by a white light as he was rocked backwards. He toppled backward in the chair he was bound to, taking it along for the ride. As Bobby crashed to the ground and the chair broke apart, loosening his bindings enough for him to free himself. Pushing aside the pain, Bobby struggled to his feet as quickly as he could. As his vision returned, he found himself facing off against Mr. Wilburn with the chessboard separating them. "You die now." Mr. Wilburn held out his hand. and a very sharp sword appeared instead of a cane this time. Bobby's out-of-control mind quickly searched for his next move that would somehow allow him to survive this. That's when he saw it, his blood once again absorbed into the board. Grabbing the Black King, he moved the piece over one spot. How? Mr. Wilburn seemed to ask the board. The spell placed on the chessboard was only supposed to allow him and the person playing white to be able to move the pieces. My blood, Bobby answered, as if he was stating what should have been obvious. The very same blood as my mother's. When I activated the board the other night, it added me as a player, didn't it? Bobby almost laughed out loud as the light bulb went off in Mr. Wilburn's brain. The utter look of both bewilderment and acknowledgement that came over his face was definitely worth admiring. That was until the look was replaced by one of sheer hatred. Mr. Wilburn raised his sword up high before bringing it down in a hard strike at Bobby's head. Cynthia was about to grab the board and throw it against the wall, not caring about the consequences. She was just sick of it all. Let me die, at least I will be with my family again. To her surprise, Cynthia watched as the Black King moved over one. Without hesitation, she moved her white knight. Checkmate. Raw in hell, old man. Bobby raised his arms reflexively in a form of defense, even though he knew that he was done for. At the last possible moment, Mr. Wilburn's entire body was blasted backwards against the wall by some unseen force. The old man screamed uncontrollably as he thrashed around while being pinned down. Bobby put his hands over his ears trying to dull the horrifying sound. Mr. Wilburn's skin began to crack all over, emitting a bright red glow instead of blood. Bobby tried to look away, but found that his eyes were riveted on the old man. He watched helplessly as Mr. Wilburn's already paper-thin skin blackened and flaked apart and flew into the air. When Bobby saw Mr. Wilburn's body bulging while the red glow shot out of the old man's eyes and nose, he knew it was time to leave. Bobby put his head down like a ram and ran straight for the exit. Just as he crossed the threshold, a fiery hand grabbed him by the shirt. For once, Bobby was glad he was overweight. The extra pounds gave him enough momentum to break free from his attacker. He was already halfway down the stairs when he still felt something on his neck. Reaching back, Bobby grabbed whatever it was and pulled it off. Then he quickly tossed it away when he saw it was Mr. Wilburn's dismembered hand. Seeing his freedom just ahead, Bobby sprinted to the front door. He skidded to a stop right before the exit when he saw Tyler's lifeless body on the floor. Kneeling next to the body, Bobby picked up his friend's head and cradled it. "I'm so sorry," Bobby cried. "Please forgive me. I'm so sorry." Bobby shot his tear-filled eyes to the ceiling, begging for mercy. Instead, he found the house shaking. Dust quickly filled the air, choking him. Coughing uncontrollably, he climbed to his feet while heading for the front door. But it wasn't just the house that was shaking. That foundation itself was vibrating, as if it was trying to tear itself apart. Trying to maintain his balance, Bobby wobbled his way towards safety. Just as his hand turned the doorknob, there was a loud explosion. Then nothing. Chapter 11. Just Another Day. Cynthia slowly opened her eyes to find a golden ray of sunlight illuminating the room. Letting out a deep yawn, she stretched her body until it felt as if it would tear itself apart. Casually wiping the sleep dust out of the corner of her eyes, she looked over to the side to find the bed empty. "David," she called, jumping out of bed in a hurry. Her pulse raced at the silence that followed. Running out of the room, Cynthia almost ran over Bobby in her haste. "Mom!" he cried, hugging her tight. "It's all my fault. Tyler, Mark, and Brad are all dead because of me. If I hadn't kicked my soccer ball into Mr. Wilburn's house, none of this would have happened." "Bobby, calm down. Breathe." Cynthia didn't know exactly what Bobby was talking about, but when he mentioned Mr. Wilburn, she knew it involved her somehow. Is this ever going to end? Kneeling, she waited until he was able to speak. "Tell me what happened." In between sobs, Bobby told his mom everything that had happened since the soccer ball incident. Cynthia listened as patiently as she could while he told his story. She really wanted to find David, but her gut told her Bobby's words were more important to hear right now. By the time Bobby finished, she was glad she did. Many of the missing pieces of the puzzle were finally fitting together. Cynthia found her own tears mixed with Bobby's as her heart broke knowing what Bobby had gone through. And all because of that chessboard. "Can you go with me to Tyler's house so I can tell his parents?" Bobby asked as he wiped his tears away with the back of his hand. "Actually, we might not have to do that, Bobby. They might be okay." "What?" Bobby asked, now completely confused. She ignored him, standing up and heading down the hall. "David!" Cynthia ran through the house with the confused Bobby in tow while she called for her husband and her mother. When there was no sign of them, dread washed over her. "They should be here. I won the game. That should have brought them all back, like last time." "Mom, come quick. Look outside." Bobby had seen flashing lights coming from the front of the house. Cynthia looked out the window and saw a fire truck along with some police cars. There were a lot of people, many still in their robes, standing off to the side of the road, staring at something. Cynthia felt her heart skip a few beats when she saw that David and her mother were among the crowd. Ripping open the front door, she sprinted to them. David had barely enough time to brace himself as Cynthia jumped in the air at him. He caught her in his arms, barely keeping his footing. Cynthia hugged him tightly while showering kisses all over his face. Whoa, easy there. Were you trying to tackle me or something? David laughed, trying to gently pry Cynthia off of him. But she wasn't having any of it. Gripping him tighter, she refused to let him go again. When David found it extremely difficult to breathe, he knew something was very wrong with his wife. Stroking her hair, he made comforting sounds to relax her enough to get answers. Finally, Cynthia did loosen her grip enough for him to talk. Cynthia, what's wrong? David asked seriously. I thought I had lost you. Like permanently lost you, Cynthia cried. Tears ran like two streams down her cheeks. Her body shook as if she were touring Antarctica without a coat. No, honey, I'm fine, David assured her. Your neighbor's house caught on fire, but the fire department got here before it could spread to ours. Your mother and I came out to see if we could help, but the police had us stay over here. Apparently me and an elderly woman with broken ribs didn't entice them to recruit us. Why are the police here? Cynthia asked, confused. If it was just a fire, shouldn't it just be the fire department that showed up? Unfortunately, I overheard one of the police officers talking to the fire chief. They suspect it may have been arson. If it was, I hope they put those punks in jail for a very long time, David said angrily. Mr. Wilburn was a cranky old man, but no one deserved having their house burned down. Bobby gave his mother a terrified look, but she shook her head slightly, indicating for him to remain quiet. Cynthia didn't think the police would be so understanding about the whole life-stealing chessboard and witchcraft story. We have a body, one of the firefighters called a nearby officer. At least what's left of it, anyway. Mr. Wilburn, Cynthia and Bobby breathed at the same time. Well, I guess those punks will now be facing murder charges as well, David spat. Stay here, I'm going to go talk to the police captain. Cynthia. Cynthia turned to see Calvin and a young boy about Bobby's age coming towards them. Cynthia, is that you? It's me, Calvin, from school. Yes, I know, Cynthia replied, confused. We talked the other day when your son Brad went missing. Missing? David asked, not understanding. My son Brad is right here. Brad, Bobby exclaimed as he hugged his friend. You're not dead. Brad's expression was one of bewilderment as he looked at his father for help. Cynthia, seeing this, began to understand. Time had somehow reset itself to a time before Brad had disappeared. Bobby, Cynthia called. She made sure he was looking directly at her when she spoke. Of course Brad's alive. Only Mr. Wilburn's house caught on fire. No one else was hurt. Bobby looked at Brad and then back at his mother. His eyes lit up as he began to acknowledge what she was saying. Time must have reset to when my blood activated the chessboard. That meant Tyler and Mark. Dad, is it all right for me and Bobby to go hang out with Tyler and Mark for a while? Brad asked as if he was reading Bobby's mind. It's fine with me if it's okay with you, Calvin asked Cynthia. As soon as she nodded her agreement, the boys took off in a sprint. The four boys sat crisscross applesauce at the park laughing as they joked around. Mark was smoking a cigarette as usual. Tyler proceeded to wipe snot on his jacket sleeve every few minutes. Brad had a collection of stones in front of him in a pile. He had found them in a creek bed and now was saving them for when he went gnome hunting. Bobby watched it all, absorbing every moment like a sponge. His entire body felt like it was going to burst from joy at having his friends back with him. He didn't care that none of them remembered anything since the first day they had broken into Mr. Wilburn's house. They only remembered coming up with the plan, but nothing after that. Sorry we never got a chance to get your ball back, Tyler offered when there was a break in the conversation. It's just a ball, Bobby said. As he picked up the stick next to him, it was his pretend sword from when they played knights at the round table earlier. What's more important is that the knighthood remains alive. All the boys jumped up and raised their pretend swords high into the air. Here we are again, Grandpa. Cynthia brushed a few fallen leaves off her grandfather's headstone. We won once again. This time, it's finally over. Cynthia paused as her own words hit her. Finally over. How profound those two words were. After all she had been through, all Bobby had been through, it was now over for good. Mr. Wilburn was dead, and her grandfather's chessboard had been lit on fire and burned to ash. Cynthia remembered the feeling of both apprehension and relief that washed over her as she watched it burn. She hated destroying something that her grandfather had prized, but knew was the right thing to do. I just wished that time would have reset back to when you were still alive. Tears soaked her cheeks, heightening the effect of the cold air on her skin. I love you and Dad so much. A warm breeze came out of nowhere, warming her entire body. Cynthia closed her eyes, embracing the feeling. It felt like one of her grandfather's hugs. Then it was gone. She pulled a chess piece out of her coat pocket and placed it on the headstone. Goodbye, Grandpa, until we meet again. After Cynthia left the cemetery, the white night she had left began to glow. Epilogue. The old man thoroughly searched the chessboard for any move he could make that would save his king from being taken. He was no novice and knew that taking your time was just as important as knowing all your next moves. The problem now was the lack of options. The old man glanced up at his opponent and couldn't believe he was going to lose to this young woman. She couldn't have been more than 25 years old, not nearly old enough to be as skilled at the game as she was. Yet, here she was defeating him at every turn. The old man had been surprised when the young lady had approached him asking to play. He had agreed only to humor her, thinking it would be a quick game, but he soon realized she was as cunning as she was beautiful. That was another reason he had agreed to play her. The last reminded him of his late wife when she was about the same age. They both had black, wavy hair that hung over their shoulders, the same emerald green eyes and full pouty lips. Of course, their chest size was definitely not the same, with the young lady easily beating his late wife in that department. Your move, the lady said with a mischievous smile. Oh, of course. Please forgive me. It's just been such a long time I have played with someone at your level. You must have had a wonderful teacher, he replied, turning his attention back to the game. My father taught me. He was a master of the craft, she replied. Really? Did he win any notable tournaments? The old man asked as he put his fingers on top of his rook, but then quickly removed them, realizing that move wouldn't work. Many. The most notable would be the Minister Championship in London. The woman smiled as if she was reliving the moment. I watched him win with the bishop, queen combo. Wait. The old man paused, furrowing his brow in doubt. The tournament happened over 80 years ago. You're way too young. Perhaps you're thinking of a different tournament. Perhaps, the woman replied, narrowing eyes. Anyway, you have no real options left. You lost. Let's end the game, shall we? The old man jerked his head up at the tension in her voice. Apparently he had struck a nerve without knowing. Regardless, he did not like to be told what to do, especially by some young filly. Patience, child. Chess is a thinking game. True, but only when there is still a chance to win. You have none. Therefore, it is ended, she said, as a matter of fact. Besides, I still must stop by the cemetery today to say goodbye to my late father. My condolences, the old man offered sadly. He now suspected the reason for her becoming defensive was because her father was dead. Guilt washed over him by calling her out on the tournament. Sometimes his mouth overrode his brain. The old man picked up his king and laid it on its side in defeat. I'm truly sorry for your loss. Thank you. I appreciate that greatly. The young woman offered her hand to shake out in the wind. Before you go, may I get your father's name? Maybe I've heard of him if he's buried around here, the old man asked, shaking her hand. Of course. His name was Jack Wilburn, she offered. Letting go of his hand, she grabbed the chessboard and its pieces, putting them away in their case. Then she left without saying another word. The old man watched her go, stunned by the revelation that she was Jack's daughter. Of course, the old man knew of Jack. Everyone in town knew of that bastard. The old man had made it a point to never play against him when he was alive. There was just something about Jack that shouted danger. The old man stood up, deciding he had enough excitement for today, and headed for his car. A sharp pain shot through his chest, then down his left arm. The old man shook it off as nothing, but when he took another step, the pain returned. This time it felt as if someone had wrapped their large hand around his heart and began to squeeze. The old man tried to scream for help, but he couldn't get a deep enough breath to do it. Soon he was lying on the ground in a fetal position, trying to stay conscious. As his eyes closed and breathing stopped altogether, a crow cawed from the wire above. Then it took flight in the direction the woman had gone. All right. Well, if you made it this far, I'm sorry. There's probably a lot of little things in there, and yeah, I don't think the volumes were anywhere consistent. I feel like there was like I don't even know. So if you made it this far, good job, and I'm sorry. Um, don't let this reflect on Mike Minicky. His book is fantastic, a great addition to, as I said earlier, Your Move. Definitely check them both out. Leave reviews on Amazon and check out Stephanie's website at stephaniejamespublishing.com. And she has her Instagram at the same name, not Instagram, Stephanie James Publishing. So then also here on YouTube, subscribe, do your thing, whatever. I don't know what else she wants me to tell you. Yeah. So check out all the books. Oh yeah. The two additional ones were that connected to this book. Check them out as of now. There's probably more later, but Last Move and Wrong Move. And then she was saying too I haven't checked these ones out. I've read Last Move and Wrong Move, but there are some that connect directly to Your Move as well. Old Pine Valley and um, Final Move. So I haven't read either of those, but I definitely want to. So thanks for listening this far, and peace out. Thanks.